Good evening, everyone. We're starting a little late. We just left executive session. We are going to reconvene the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting at 6:20 on February 20th. John, was this meeting properly warned?
Yes, Ian, it was properly warned.
Excellent. Thank you.
Did we take any action in executive
And we
session?
are not taking any action in executive session. Okay, so board, I'd look for a motion on the minutes.
I motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting.
And I'll take the meeting before that too. So Peter has made a motion to approve the minutes from February 1st, 2024 and February 6th of 2024. Board members, is there any discussion?
Yes.
Yes. Franz.
Thank you, Ian. There's just a couple of typographical corrections of varying magnitudes. One is that Franklin and Ingrid Crisco spoke on a couple of times at our last meeting, and their name is misspelled in a couple of spots. There's an H after the C in Crisco.
Yeah. Okay.
so-
And I see that even right at the beginning
Yeah.
on line 15 and then going forward from there.
The other correction is on page 3 of the minutes, page 8 of 134 of our backup material, and it's in line 37. And it refers to something that Liz asked, and it says, McLaughlin asked if there was something that altered the town when a building becomes vacant, and I believe that should say alerted the town when a building becomes vacant.
Thank
Just
you,
a
Franz.
transposition of a few letters there. So I would move that we amend the minutes to make those corrections or
Absolutely.
substitutions.
Friendly amendment there, Peter. Good to go?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so alerted and the Crisco name being spelled correctly, and I think that's all out of the February 6th minutes.
Yes, that's correct.
Is there anything out of February 1st? Are you good? No, okay. I'll look to members of the public, see if there's anybody who wants to speak on the minutes. And I don't see any hands in the room. I don't have any hands in Zoom. All right, board. So there's a motion to approve the minutes of February 1st and February 6th, 2024 as amended. All board members in favor, please indicate with an aye.
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 Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. And I'm going to move on to agenda item 3, which is chair remarks. My only chair remark this evening is, I'm just pulling up my calendar to make sure I have the right date. I do. Tuesday, March 5th is town meeting day. So get out there, vote. The polls are open from 7 to 7. I believe we're going to have a select board meeting after that. But we're not going to have it until after the polls close. So, and the polling station for Brattleboro is the American Legion, which is 100, 200 yards that way. So, and with that, I will pass it over to agenda item 4, manager's comments.
And I will just jump on that by informing everybody or letting everybody know that absentee ballots are now available by request, and they must be requested if you wish to vote absentee. This can be done by applying at the town clerk's office up and until Monday, March 4th at 5 p.m. All voted ballots have to be received by the town clerk before polls close on Election Day to be counted. And there's more information on the town website at brattleboro.gov or at the town clerk's office at 230 Main Street. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, John. And you can drop your ballots off. There's a drop box in the back of the municipal center. And then actually the day of, I get this question a lot when I'm helping at the polls, there's actually a drop box at the polling station. So if you did it and you don't want to pull it all apart and then, re-vote inside, you can just come up and drop it. There's a drop box right in the lobby. Okay, so I'll move on to agenda item 5, which is select board comments, committee reports. Board members. Again, down the line. No? Peter.
Yeah. So just want to remind everybody that this Thursday, right here in this very room, the candidates who are running for the next round of select board seats will be here doing a little Q&A, and we're welcoming everybody to join. It starts at 6 right here. Second thing I'd like to say is, and thank the organizing board of the Harris Hill Committee, who put together another hugely successful event at Harris Hill. If you didn't go, you really missed a really good weekend of solid athleticism, jumping, general, just a great time and just a wonderful event, 102 years. And now they've already started to put together 103, so we'll look forward to that next year. So if you didn't make it to the Harris Hill this year, please come out and see it next year. It's a lot of fun, and it's a huge Brattleboro tradition.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Other board members? Franz? No?
No, thanks.
Okay. So we're going to move on to agenda item 6, which is public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on something that's not on the agenda or to request an item on the consent agenda get pulled for consideration at the end of the regularly warned agenda. So I'll look to members in the room first. Don't see any hands. And I'll look to Zoom, and I do see a hand. I believe that's David.
Can't hear him.
Just got to
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Yes, I would like to ask that item 7C, the ARPA sweep, be taken off the consent agenda.
Look, see if there's any other. Don't see any other hand in Zoom, and I don't see any other hand in the room. So we will move on to agenda item 7, which is the consent agenda. I'll pass it over to John for a brief introduction for those items.
Yep, there are 4 items on your consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be authorizing staff to apply for a Building Resilient Communities grant in the amount of $98,400 for a scoping study to develop a flood mitigation and pathway project on the lower Whetstone Brook. You will be approving a $303,430 amendment to the engineering services contract with Dufresne Group Consulting Engineers for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility project, which we will be trying to recover the cost of this through state funding and or liquidated damages. You will be approving an administrative transfer of $2,757,275.47 in ARPA funds into the general fund.
That's been pulled.
It hasn't been pulled yet.
Requested that's been pulled.
Yes.
Sorry.
So on that item where there was a request, it's an administrative transfer of the ARPA funds into the general fund and applying that to payroll in order to implement the priorities that you approved back in January. I want to emphasize that this does not change any of the allocations that you made then. It just means that we will avoid not meeting any of the federal deadlines and make sure that we never have to return any of the funding. So this action would be for accounting and reporting purposes and reducing risks to the town. And the final item on your consent agenda would be ratifying a parade permit that we issued for the Lunar New Year Festival's Dragon Parade.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Board members, anyone wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Franz?
Yes, I understand the town manager's explanation of the ARPA fund transfer, and I think it's really a bookkeeping matter more than anything else. But it's been requested by at least 2 or 3 people in town to open that up for discussion, and so I would request that it be removed from the consent agenda.
Great. All right, so I think per our rules, my understanding is that it's not a vote. We just pull it. It's just a request from one board member pulls it. So that pulls it. So then the consent agenda now is items A, B, and D. Any other board members wish to pull an item? Seeing none. All right, board. Can I get a motion then? Daniel.
Yeah, I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Daniel's made a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. So we will add item 7C, Disperse American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds. That's going to be new business agenda item 8, A, B, C, D, E, F. ARPA. Great. All right. So we're going to move on to agenda item 8A, new business committee vacancies. We had a great suggestion from Peter last meeting that we have this item be considered more at the beginning of the meeting so that more people hear about the committee vacancies, because it's kind of our practice to do this at the very end. And as you'd imagine, not as many people are here then. So we read these through last meeting, but we decided to put it on at the beginning of this meeting to read through again. So I'm going to read through them, and then John's going to just briefly explain how you go about applying for one of these committee vacancies for the town. So for the ADA Advisory Committee, we have 4 vacancies. For the Arts Committee, there is 1 vacancy. For the Cemetery Committee, there is 1 vacancy. For the Citizen Police Communications Committee, the CPCC, there are 2 vacancies. For the Developmental Review Board alternate, there is 1 vacancy. For the Energy Committee, there are 3 vacancies. For the Fence Viewer, there are 3 vacancies. For the Honor Roll, there are 3 vacancies. For the Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood, there is 1 vacancy. For the Planning Commission, there is 1 vacancy. And for the Wear of Coal, there is currently 1 vacancy. And John, if someone heard one of these committees and was either interested to learn more about what the committee did or was interested in applying to be a member of that committee, what would they do?
They would reach out to the town manager's office. You can stop by at our office during business hours at 230 Main Street, or you can look for information online at brattleboro.gov. All the information that you need is there, including contact numbers and an email address that you can reach out to Jessica Stickler to get more information.
Great. Thank you very much, John.
Yep.
I don't believe there's a motion on that.
No.
No motion is required for this item.
Great. Thank you.
Did we determine whether, a person could be a wearer of coal and a fence sitter? Could that be?
We were supposed to.
You don't want to hog all the good spots.
We don't know that yet.
We don't.
Actually, Attorney Fisher might be able to opine.
I don't have Title 17 in front of me, but I don't think that is an incompatible office. There is a section on incompatible offices, but I don't think those two are incompatible with one another.
So if somebody were interested, they would have to check on compatibility.
Or, no, it sounds like they are compatible. So you could be both the Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood and the Wearer of Coal.
I can
Or resolving important.
look that up.
If you had the time. Okay. So in that case, we're going to move on to agenda item 8B, which is the Fire Department monthly report. So I will invite the chief and not AC, just the chief.
Where's the truck?
Oh, and Mr. Fritz up. Great. Welcome.
Good evening. I'll do the monthly report, but I just want to introduce our EMS superintendent, Billy Fritz.
Welcome.
He'll be talking to you in a couple minutes.
Great.
So for the month of January, EMS billed $604,657.40 and collected $526,637.55. As of the end of January, we had done 1,921 EMS calls. 1,236 of those were transports, 685 were non-transports. Average time to scene, 4 minutes and 25 seconds. 90th percentile time to scene, emergent response, 7:01. We needed 2 ambulances 345 times for 17.96%. 3 ambulances 34 times for 1.77%. And mutual aid once for 0.05%. EMS startup costs. To date, we have spent $356,481.73. The things that we have paid for so far are mobile radios, portable radios, turnout gear, 1 ambulance, and put a deposit on 2 other ambulances. And part of the EMS supervisor salary. And that's my report.
Thank you very much, Chief. Board, if I can get a motion and then we can have discussion. Daniel?
Move to accept the fire department's monthly report as presented.
Thank you very
I'd like
much.
to speak to.
Yeah, as is your right as the motion maker.
Thanks so much. Chief Howard, thank you for the report. I was a little confused by the middle column for a few minutes today, and the town manager set me right. So if I was confused, chances are somebody else in the public is also confused. So the middle column is like July 1, 2022 through to January 31, 2023. And the third column is July 1, 2023 through to January 31st, 2024.
That's correct.
So these two columns are, the same period, so you can do a comparison and notice that, call volume's slightly up, number of transports is slightly down, and everything else is largely unremarkable. And so maybe there's some way to word the headings of those columns so that it's easier to kind of
Most certainly.
notice that comparison next month.
Yep.
So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Other board members? Liz has her hand up. Liz?
Chief Howard, I see that the build and the revenue are getting closer. Would you say, is there a reason for that? Would you say that the machine is working, or?
I think we're getting more consistent and more, each month we're kind of collecting the same amount, kind of getting in a rhythm of we're actually
Yeah, that's what it looked like
collecting
to
what we
me.
should be collecting. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Liz. Other board members? Franz, is that a hand?
No, that's just a limp wrist.
Fair enough. Okay, in that case, I will turn it over to the public and see if we've got any questions from members of the public. I don't see any hands on Zoom. I see one hand on the room. If you want to come up, Dick.
Just wanted to follow up on Liz's question with the billing and the collection. Is that for December you billed, or is that for, what would that time period of billing be for? And then what would that collection period be for? It's not like...
That's for July of 2023
Okay, so from July...
to January 31 of
Okay,
20.
so that's what you've billed and that's what you've
That's-
collected.
yep.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Dick. Other members of the public wish to speak? See any other hands?
I'll
Franz?
just jump in on that and point out that if you annualize the $526,637.55 out to a full year, you come up with just about $900,000, which is just about our projected revenue for next year. So maybe we'll hit our revenue targets in the future. At least it provides me with a little bit of hope that we're not far off in our revenue estimates.
It's actually a little above the Golden Cross projected
And I
revenue.
also believe our collection rate is a little higher than what we had projected at this point. In fact, significantly higher than what we had projected. If I'm doing my math right, it's like at 87%. And I think, well, that, just based on these numbers that I have here in front of me, it's 87%. So, and our projections were, do we remember what those were, those numbers that we were playing around with? I want to say they were.
Next page.
Oh.
No.
Well, anyway, it's significantly higher. We can just leave it at that.
Other board members? Thank you, Lenny, very much for the presentation. We'll take a vote on the motion, but I just want to echo, as I have in the past, my appreciation for the fire department coming and giving a presentation to the board. I think it's really important to keep the board and the public up to date with both the hybrid program we have with Golden Cross, but then also the EMS implementation as it moves forward. So, and I know we're about to do another big step in that in the next item, so looking forward to that too. And with that, board, the motion is to accept the fire department's monthly report as presented. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. All right. We're going to move on to agenda item 8C, which is the Emergency Medical Services Policies, Billing and Collections. And I will first hand it over to John briefly.
Yeah, and thank you, Ian. So in September of last year, the board approved us moving forward with the fire EMS in-house implementation, municipal management. And since that time, Chief Howard and his team has been doing an excellent job on the implementation. And that's involved developing lots of procedures, doing recruitment, ordering and receiving materials that we need to do this. And one of the things that he's done is hired our EMS superintendent, Billy Fritz, who has contributed quite significantly to this policy before you tonight. This billing and collection policy was one of the things that we discussed last September, is something that with a fully municipal approach, this is the sort of thing that the select board gets to weigh in on and help determine where the town is going to go. And so for both this billing and collection, which is before you tonight, as well as a response standard, which will be coming to you over the next couple months, those two items are the things that we need the select board to set a policy for as we continue to move forward on this implementation. So tonight, Chief Howard will introduce this topic, and I believe Superintendent Fritz will be providing us a presentation. So
Great.
that is what we have tonight.
Thank you very much, John. And Superintendent Fritz, welcome again. We look forward to hearing from you, and I'll turn it over to you all for, I think, a brief presentation. Yeah.
So here's.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm excited to be here. So, as the town manager said, we have to decide on how we're going to make some collections and some billing, and that's what we're here to talk to a little bit about tonight. We have this little presentation. I think it just helps explain our options and where we are a little bit better. While the Brattleboro Fire Department has been doing this for over 2 decades, we're changing a little bit, and now we're going into the transport portion of it, which is going to require some funding. So, next slide, please. We have taken care of patients for a long time, but tonight we need to talk about how we're going to establish the guidelines for billing, collection, and recovering costs for the services that we're providing. Ambulance transports are covered by payers such as insurance companies, and so it is important to offset the operational costs by having that collection and recouping some of that from the payers, insurance companies. As a municipality in this model, we are not for profit, so this is really to cover our operational costs and personnel. So we have a couple of options to talk about, and so we have recommended both option ones, and I wanted to show you some of the other options that you have for discussion, but as recommended, option 1, compassionate A, as we call it. Compassionate billing is for the Brattleboro town residents and sort of discusses what a resident and a non-resident collection policy may look like. After services are rendered, we would send a bill to the payer, that's the insurance company, and we would request reimbursement from them. As you can see outlined here, we have several bills that we would send to try to collect those funds. These would be after we have tried to obtain funding from the payer, the insurance company. In this presentation, or in this option, residents would be billed up to 5 bills for payment, and then at that point, we would review writing off a bill for a resident. Non-residents would then be sent to collections. So that's sort of our distinguishing mark with Compassionate A is residents and non-residents. Next, please. So option B, it's very similar, a similar flavor to Compassionate A, but Compassionate B reduces the number of bills that we would send from 5 to 3, still keeping the fact that residents would have their bills reviewed for write-off and non-residents would be sent to collections. sort of how we've looked at this as residents are tax-paying members in our community as non-residents are not. So they're already sort of paying for the service where a non-resident is not. And then option 3 is what we would call a strong billing model. And the difference here is very similar to our compassionate B, but after the 90 days, all bills would be sent to collections, regardless of your residency. So those are sort of the 3 billing and collection models. And then we'll talk about the funding, right? And so the rate options. When the AP Triton report was done, they made a recommendation for flat billing at $1,400 for EMS transport. Some models distinguish between BLS and ALS transport. The AP Triton listed it as a flat rate for $1,400. EMS Treat No Transport, they recommended $110, and then there were paramedic and ground mileage recommendations. These recommendations, which we are presenting tonight, would be for $110, Treat No Transport, $150 for a paramedic intercept, and ground mileage, $22 per mile. The reason you'll see an asterisk there is because since the report was written, funding has been changed for Medicare and Medicaid, and so we've updated some of these numbers. And as we go through this, you'll see a funding at the very end. Some of the numbers are slightly different because we have real numbers on the number of transports we've done so far, so we have actual data, and the numbers for Medicaid and Medicare have been changed since this report was completed. So with our estimated collections there, we're listed.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Option 2, perfect. 949, 885 would be the estimated collections, and again, these numbers come from the feasibility study from 2022. The second option, which is a potential for discussion, is a fee by call type. Option 1 is a flat rate, $1,400. Option 2 is sort of based off of what Rescue Inc. had proposed in the RFP cost proposal that they presented when they submitted their RFP. A BLS transport would be at $770, an ALS-1 transport, $1,100, and an ALS-2, $1,375. Treat No Transport and paramedic intercepts, those numbers are very similar. The paramedic intercept is slightly higher. The estimated collections with this fee for service is slightly lower at $855, $517. Part of this would be is if you looked at our breakdown numbers, and I believe the assistant town manager had presented it previously, is BLS and ALS just the frequency of transports. We do much more BLS transports than ALS transports. Final option that we would have for option 3 is another fee by call type, and we have BLS, ALS. These numbers are slightly higher. These numbers are based off of the published rates for Keene, New Hampshire, a similar service area close by. So BLS transports at $14.45, ALS transports not distinguished between type 1 and type 2 at $17.16. Treat No Transport ground mileage, they bill slightly higher, and their paramedic intercept is slightly higher as well, for a total collection of $973, $726. Now, I think this would be a little more helpful if we explain it as a patient, right? So if you were a user of our system. So, for example, Miss Adams. Miss Adams lives in Brattleboro and has Medicare Part B. She has met her deductible, and she's transported emergently for a cardiac-related emergency to the hospital for ALS care. In option 1, we would bill $1,400. We would get $530, and the balance bill, the 20% that Medicare would bill, would be $106. Now, if you change our payment options, depending on whatever the rate was, $11.55 or $17.60, you will see the numbers are the same. This is to demonstrate that Medicare Part B has a fee that they're going to pay. It's regardless of what we bill. Another example which I think would be helpful. Miss Baker is a Brattleboro resident who has private insurance. She is transported emergently to the hospital for a cardiac-related emergency. She gets ALS care. Here is where it's a little bit different because $1,400 is billed. We are reimbursed $1,400. She gets a zero bill. Now, you can see that the numbers change as the billing rates change, but there's an asterisk there, and that's pretty important because that is determined on what the allowables is from the private insurer. So depending on what the insurance rates are, that's what we're going to be reimbursed. Ms. Clark has no insurance, is transported. This is where the money would be different. So if we went with option one, the $1,400, the town of Brattleboro would have the compassionate billing or whatever collection policy was accepted, and that would be how a payment plan or payment would be received from Ms. Clark. Finally, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis lives in Connecticut and is traveling through Brattleboro. He gets in an auto crash and requires ALS care. He has private insurance. If we went with depending on the different options, right? So looking at option one, that would be a bill rate of $1,400 flat. Private insurance would reimburse about $910, and then Mr. Davis would have a bill of $590. You can see at the $1,155, the percentages of how the reimbursement goes would be different. Now, again, there's an asterisk. That asterisk is because these numbers are, we'll say, standard, but it's going to depend on your explanation of benefits. Everybody has different insurance and different insurance policies. So while you or I may both have Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Healthcare, my employer may have a different plan than yours, and that's where a person should look at their explanation of benefits or their summary of benefits to know exactly how much they would have to pay, because those are insurance dependent. So this slide is a little bit challenging to read, but this compares the payers, the payer mix. So whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, self-pay, and the patients that we have. So these run the numbers depending on the rates, whether it's $1,400 for we'll call it the AP Triton model, option 2, which is billing off of the RFP rates from Rescue, or option 3, which would be using Keen rates. And you can see the different numbers here. To sort of summarize it for you and make it easier, there's the easy numbers. So if we look at option 1, the revenue is projected for $949,885. Option 2 is $855,517, and option 3 is $973,726. These financials do exclude mileage, paramedic intercept, and EMS treat no transport. Those are things that were not originally calculated in those numbers, so those would be in addition to the revenue that's listed there. I like to talk about buckets, and the care bucket is one, and the mileage bucket is another. So we would bill that's a separate line item, so we would bill for ground mileage fees separately. Something that's different from before, as just to note, is there was a supplement that was provided, and that would be of upwards of almost $300,000. So if you would have added that to our previous billing rates, we would have to include that number in for the cost, because that is what we had previously been quoted to pay as a supplement for services. So those are, I hope that helps explain a lot of the text with the different options and the different bill rates to make it a little more digestible.
Excellent. John?
Yeah, and I just thank you, Superintendent Fritz. Appreciate that presentation. And Chief Howard, I just wanted to explain that the recommendation was for the first option in both of those, and those have been incorporated into the policy in the backup material that's in the board's backup material starting at page 35. And so if you specifically look at page 37, which is section 3C, that addresses the collections option 1, and then 4B on that same page addresses the rates option 1. Is that correct, or am I getting that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Great.
So hopefully that's
That's
helpful.
very helpful, John. So Superintendent Fritz, thank you again very much. It's great to meet you, and thank you very much for the presentation. I will take a motion in a moment to get this conversation started, but two little bits of housekeeping. I think or just one actually, the presentation that was provided in the backup material didn't have those last like X number of slides.
I think those were developed today or recently to help try to just.
Nope, I think they were very helpful. Actually, they were great. I was like, I can't believe I missed this when I was reviewing the
We
backup
can get
material.
them on the website.
Yeah, so if we can just make sure that the backup material is updated to include that and it goes on the website as well, because I think it'd be really helpful for people to be able to review that as well as the board's making the decision.
Just a note also, some of you may be wondering why we didn't offer a subscription program. It's something we didn't do right now. It's something that we possibly could do down the road. My only concern is us being a municipality. Are we kind of double dipping there because people are paying their taxes, we're sending them a bill, and now we're going to give a subscription program for, so that's certainly not something that's certainly can't be done in the future, but that's why we didn't bring it forward tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Yeah, let's have a motion board.
I'll motion.
Peter?
Okay. I'll motion to adopt the Town of Brattleboro's emergency medical service billing and collections policy as presented.
Thank you very much, Peter. So, board, basically we have a proposed policy before us. The two real things for discussion are the billing and collection policy and the rate option policy. And in the proposed option, as was described by John, we've got compassionate A for the billing collection and rate option 1 from AP Triton for the rate collection in the proposal. But there's nothing to say that we couldn't modify or change those as we discuss further. So I'll open up to board members for questions or comments. Franz.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me introduce myself to Mr. Fritz, who I haven't met. My name is Franz Reichsman. Sort of lines up with your name a little bit, but I'm a retired emergency physician with some experience in EMS matters, just to clue you into that. So I guess I've got a few different questions here. One is, I don't think I've heard anything about paramedic intercepts before right now, and I'm trying to envision what you'd be intercepting. I mean, that you'd be sending out a paramedic in a smaller vehicle to take over care from some lower ranked EMTs, I guess. I mean, that's what paramedic intercept is. Mm-hmm. But for whom would you be providing that service, and how many of those are you anticipating, et cetera?
It would be a service that we could offer somebody that's transporting to Brattleboro Memorial Hospital that calls and says they need a paramedic intercept. They would give us a location where they'd want to meet us, and we would meet them there to get them that level of care they needed. Do we see it happening a lot? No, we don't. We haven't been requested yet, but we figured as we're doing the fee structure that we might as well put that in the fee structure to have it in there in the event that it does happen, or so it's there.
So it would be some non-Brattleboro squad that's coming in. Most of those we might anticipate would already have a paramedic on board, so it would be a somewhat unusual event to get that request. But if it did happen, we'd send them a bill.
In the event that it did happen, the ambulance company that's transporting will bill the patient. We would bill the transport service that requested us the bill for the intercept of the patient.
That's good, thank you. Now, in putting these together, I think there's a lot of flexibility. You could have mixed and matched in a lot of different ways, many more than just 3 options. So I guess I'm kind of curious about how you did that. You know, what you put in the mix, and specifically why you thought the first options are the best ones, and what you maybe thought was good about the other ones. I mean, what I'm looking for is a little advice as to why you think we should go ahead and approve this as the motion was made for the first option for both rates and collection.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think you're right. There are a lot of options. And sometimes it's like when you go to Cheesecake Factory and the menu is so big you don't know what you want. And so you have to ask for advice. Looking at what other organizations and municipalities around the area are doing, I think that gives us a good idea of what would work for our area. We want to make sure we are being adequately reimbursed for the services that we provide. We're not trying to make money. We're trying to cover our costs and make sure we're providing the best possible service to be efficient, effective, but also be cost conscious. And I think that's where this comes in. When you talk about distinguishing between ALS and BLS transports, that can also get a little bit granular, and that's going to come down to some documentation. So looking at what AP Triton's recommendations, who did a great job on a study and did a lot of research as well, I think taking that into account, it's best that a flat rate is there. We're not leaving, as we've talked about, or as you've talked about in the, before, money on the table, because we're making sure we're maximizing our reimbursements from those payers, private insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid.
And any thoughts on the compassionate versus strong collection policies? You should realize, of course, what you're saying is that compassionate people can't be strong. We'll leave that aside. What do you think the benefits of those things are?
Absolutely. I think, as the chief mentioned, we talked a little bit about the subscription model. The residents of Brattleboro are already paying for services, and so I think that's important to take into account. We also have a lot of people who visit us and are traveling through and may not be paying for some of those services. So from a reimbursement standpoint and a billing standpoint, I think that's something for the select board to have as a discussion to provide as a service to our residents.
Okay. Thank you. I think there's one thing that came up that Daniel was wondering about too, but I guess I'll jump in because I was wondering about it. And there was almost $300,000 of supplemental something on the slide, and I didn't know what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Good question. Thank you. So if we look at how the service was run previously, and there was fees charged to the town to provide those services that was paid to a vendor, and so taking that into account as well, there's the costs associated with that. I just wanted to make sure that in transparency, we're discussing that previously the town had to pay for a service as well. That's not the case in this model.
Okay. The one other thing that struck me is that it seems like the treat no transport charges are not in the estimated collection totals.
Correct.
So if there were 1,000 treat no transports in FY23, and that was accurate for now and the future, that would be an additional $110,000 that we would be at least billing. I don't know about collecting, but so over and above the estimated collection totals that you gave, we could maybe add $110,000 onto that in terms of amounts billed.
Correct. That is an option. That is not included in there because that would, for example, there are some payers that do not reimburse that. There are other payers that are, and there's legislation currently in the House that is talking about how that would be funded, and with Medicaid, for example, providing some of that funding. So this is preparing us to be ready for if that is available funding, that we are reimbursed for that, and again, making sure we're compensated for the services provided.
But if the governmental reimbursers are not paying that now, so we shouldn't count on seeing a lot of that at this point.
I don't have the data to be able to provide that currently, just because it's something we haven't done before. So I think that, we are providing those services to our community members, and so looking for some compensation to replace the IV we've started or the oxygen we've used, I think is sort of what we're looking for there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Franz. Other board members? Daniel.
Thanks. Superintendent Fritz, thank you for the presentation. Is superintendent your preferred title, or?
You can call me whatever you would like.
Okay, I'll stick with superintendent then. I just want to kind of get the ball rolling here on what we're going to decide to do or not do. I think the billing and collection policy that you're proposing is fine. I envisage some sort of challenges with discerning who is a resident and who is not, and I'm sure that our billing company can work that out, and I'm going to stay out of it for now. All along, what has appealed to me about the possibility of doing this service ourselves is the ability to set rates. That's a policy decision that we will get to make tonight, and I'm excited to make it. What I have wanted to be able to do in this is to fund a service that's good for the people of Brattleboro, but I also want to be compassionate in how I bill the people of Brattleboro as well. So I am not in favor of a flat rate billing of $1,400. I've said that all along. Nobody should be surprised at this point. Option 2, where we separate out, different kinds of calls, is more palatable to me. I think that it's important to note that we budgeted $837,000 for EMS reimbursement revenue, so option 2 would meet that budgeted amount and exceed it by a modest amount. So I think that it's responsible to pick that one. I think that it necessarily involves a decision to then revisit these rates on an annual basis, probably as part of the budget cycle. The flat rate billing of $1,400 would maybe allow us to set it today and forget it for a couple of years until we start to notice that it's out of whack. So I just want to kind of bring that up. You spoke to some of the assumptions that are behind these numbers, and that was really helpful to me, so I appreciate that. And I think Franz brought up the fact that the treat no transport fee was not really something we were talking about a while ago. It could potentially bill for a little over $100,000. I'd imagine we would expect to collect a very, very small amount of that. And I did it at a 15% collection rate, which was what we had for uninsured folks. And it came out to about $16,000. So I think it's right not to include that number in our final calculation. So I'd ask my fellow board members to really think about the people of Brattleboro who will be using these services. It's true that the vast majority of folks are on Medicare or Medicaid, and those policies are going to reimburse with a specific dollar amount. And then our billing policy is going to then send a bill for the small remainder, perhaps, and after a time, that will be written off, perhaps. People who have private insurance, which includes all town staff, includes myself, includes the chair of the select board, have varying qualities of policy, and largely because it's employer-sponsored insurance, have very little ability to negotiate that. The town is lucky, the town staff are lucky that they are members of unions. Most people are not members of unions and don't get to negotiate really great health insurance policies. I have a $14,000 deductible on my plan. So if I get a bill for $1,400, I'm paying every penny of that. I will be on effectively a different system than somebody who receives an ambulance call and is on Medicare or Medicaid. That is going to reimburse at a specific dollar amount. So I would ask that we don't build this system on the backs of the 13% of ambulance users who have private insurance of varying qualities, and that we go with option 2, which is reasonable for us to cover our costs, and we revisit in 1 year's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Other board members? Liz.
Good evening. Nice to meet you, Superintendent Fritz.
Thank you.
I let's talk about rate option 2 for a minute, because I understand your presentation said that these were the rates that Rescue Inc. proposed in their RFP. But it was my understanding from AP Triton that this is not the rate that Rescue Inc. charges its customers. I thought that was closer to $1,400. Do you have information about that?
Their rates are broken down, and they charge other things too. Is like if they provide you oxygen, there's a certain charge. If they use the EKG machine on you, there's another charge. So depending on what they pick you up for, there could potentially be additional charges on top of their rate for a BLS or ALS call. So you could be, I'm not saying every time it's going to be up to that $1,400, but if they do a couple interventions, you're going to be up on an ALS rate, you're going to be up to.
So it's
close.
itemized.
Right.
But I just didn't think that the rate that they proposed in their RFP to us was their standard rate that they use throughout the, because I think the AP Triton report said that it was higher, and I know it was higher for the region that they serve more than Golden Cross did. So I just, calling these Rescue Inc. numbers this was a space and time that they proposed, and they had certain reasons for proposing it, I'm sure, but I don't think it was their regular rates, because actually my husband went to the hospital and he got a bill, I think it was for $1,400, and so I just question that the veracity of those numbers and calling them Rescue Inc. numbers, whatever. There's a couple of questions I had about South Burlington, and I thought it was a good example, but I just wanted to explore it. First of all, they had page 52 of 134, aged balances. They had 12 months to write something off as uncollectible. And, I know from my experience with insurance companies and hospitals that, the insurance company will say that we don't have coverage. Well, then we have to wait 2 months and say, yes, we do. And then it goes back and blah, blah, blah. And it's a morass. And I don't know that 150 days is enough time for, frankly, the BS associated with insurance. So I question that. And then can you explain to me what the Medicare, Medicaid write-off guidelines are?
When you say, if you could clarify, when you say what their write-offs are,
Well, on page 52 of the South Burlington plan, they have as a policy that their write-off credit balance will follow federal state guidelines. And is that something that you were just saying a minute or so ago, that Medicare and Medicaid had new policies? Would that be a part of that?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, there becomes, and maybe I apologize if I'm not answering your question. I'm going to try. What that means is there are certain things you cannot bill over for. So as in the example with our patients that we used, there is a fee that they will pay, and that's what they will pay. We will be, whether we billed them $2,000, $200,000, or $20, we're going to get the same amount, and we cannot go after the rest of that. So I think that's what this is referring to, and I hope that's what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then it also, you had said that the residents with a balance after this time period may be written off. What's the process by which the town of Brattleboro decides to write something off?
Yeah, I think that's really what we're here to discuss tonight. And so that is where you have the power to make those decisions.
And
empowered.
So we could establish some sort of panel or would it be within the your department?
I think we're here tonight to get, if it's up to you guys to tell us whether you want us to do 5 bills or if you want us to bill for a year. That's
I guess I see your question.
I'm asking, not only do we have this process, but there's a procedure for that decision to whether we're going to write something off. Is it automatic, or is there, under this compassionate plan, is there some sort of compassionate gang of 3 that decides that?
I think my understanding right now is the proposal would be basically after a certain number of bills that go out,
It's
once
automatic.
it's automatic.
Yep.
Okay. Taking Daniel's point into consideration, you know, the deductible is the hard part. You know, a basically healthy person who has a acute medical episode has to pay that deductible. I'm assuming that if you're being transported to the hospital and then you go to the hospital, the ambulance bill is the least of your problems. So I would assume in the world of, you know, deductibles, that by the time this episode is over, you've met your deductible.
That's true.
And so therefore, it's not an isolated incident of you being responsible because you haven't met your deductible with this transport.
And I'm going to speak, and Billy can correct me if I'm wrong, but we did some research today, and again, he said it depends on your policy or your benefits in your policy. Some high deductibles pays you won't get a bill for your ambulance visit. Some will. So not everybody, just because you got a high deductible, doesn't mean that it's not going to pay it, because it depends on your benefits in your plan as to whether it pays it. So Lonnie Howard's plan may not pay it, but Billy's does. And we both have Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's just how the benefits are. So it's not really fair to say, or accurate to say, that everybody with a high deductible is going to end up paying the ambulance bill, because that's not the case.
Yeah. And I think we all hate the fact that it's such a Cheesecake Factory menu. But it seems to me that that's where a payment plan would come in. And then I'm asking the same question again. Who decides what the payment plan would be? And is there I would like to see the $1,400 rate with an understanding that the payment plan has a variation for town residents. Like, that would eliminate or go a long way towards the deductible question that's given in isolation, and you would have some sort of understanding of the person who has this high deductible and is forced to pay this transport fee, who lives in Brattleboro, wants to pay, but doesn't have, isn't covered and might need some compassion for that bill. And so can we, the 5 of us, create a system where these payment plans are viewed on a case-by-case basis in a holistic way?
I think the easiest way is you folks tell us. We can tell our billing company, and a patient calls and says, I want to set up a payment plan. You call our billing company, and they're going to set up a payment plan with you.
Right. But the question is the payment plan discounted for town residents?
I think that's up to us.
That's up to you
And
guys.
that's at us.
Daniel had his hand up again, but I haven't heard from him yet. He just wanted to respond. Did you want to respond?
I guess, to Liz's point about, like, in the event of needing an ambulance transport to the hospital, the ambulance bill is perhaps the least of your worries. It's the only piece of it that we have any control over. And so I would like to exercise some control and try and do the right thing for the person in the back of that ambulance. But I would also like to do the right thing for the town that are, funding the ambulance, which is why I think option B is okay as a starting place for year one of this service, because it provides enough revenue to cover what we've budgeted for revenue. I think to your other point about payment plans and so forth, yeah, I think having like a clear policy on that is important, right? So like if somebody wishes to enter into a payment plan, our routine payment plan should be X number of months. Maybe we start with it's a 12-month payment plan that you enter into as a matter of course, and upon breaking that payment plan, then such and such a thing happens. And I guess to your point of like, well, so say I do get a $1,400 bill for my ambulance transport. It went to the insurance. The insurance said, well, he hasn't met his deductible. So then I get a bill saying, okay, please send us a check for $1,400. And I look at my bank balance and I say, I really can't do that and pay my rent this month. So at that point, I then either ignore the bill for 150 days, which is what the current collection policy kind of says, or I try and do something with the billing company that we've employed. And it's a tough line to walk because I don't really want to be saying, hey, people of Brattleboro, just ignore the bills for 150 days because they'll go away, because that's going to cause...
That's not responsible.
Yeah, that's going to cause a problem. So I'm not quite sure what to do about that.
So I have a thought on it. I had a medical bill in the summer, and it was when I got the bill, it was offered a payment plan, and the payment plan had no interest. So it was just basically pay X number of dollars a month for 12 months, and it'll be paid off. And I was like, yeah, if they're going to get the money, but I can, I don't have to chalk up all this money at once. That makes a lot of sense for me. It makes sense for the hospital. So my thought would be and we're talking about, if we're talking about compassion and meeting people where they're at, I hear everything that Daniel's saying, and I really appreciate it. And if we can think about that in the billing process, someone getting a bill that's for $1,400, it could be really devastating, life-changing, right? And so offering with the bill itself an opportunity for a payment plan that could be as little as, $150 a month or $100 a month or something like that. The town slowly gets repaid with no interest, so they're not losing money on that, but they're able to be responsible and pay the bill that they owe, but they can do it in a way that doesn't fiscally potentially fiscally really hurt them in the short term. So my thought would be, don't put the onus on the resident to have to plead with a billing agency. Please, God, give me a plan to pay this back because I can't pay $1,400. Put it on us to present that to them and give them that opportunity right out the gate, out the gate. Because I think, just let me finish, the compassion there is not making people beg for to try to affect the system so that they can not be stressed by this bill. So that would be my way of doing that. And I don't know if we can. I would hope that we could put that in our bills for it. And I would say zero interest and a 12-month payment plan. They have a year. No matter what plan we go with, that's going to push it down to a monthly bill that hopefully is small enough that people could pay. Hopefully, and maybe if they can't. So that's my thought on that. But I
like the direction we're going in. I understand the one thing that Daniel's kind of advocating for, and is that's saying, if we can lower even that initial transport and given this option, it seems to be the most compassionate route. I don't disagree with either one of those. I like the fact that of saying here, so we're sorry that you're being doled this, but here's an option for you right out of the gate, so that we don't have to go begging. But I think we also need to acknowledge, like, for a $1,400 bill over the course of 12 months is a little over $100, and that can still be a little bit of a financial hardship for people. And I want to be sensitive to that. I don't know that we want to drag this thing out for years, but maybe it's maybe in those instances, case by case basis, we can sort of say, here's our option. If you can't pay this whole thing, if you need to make other arrangements, we are happy to work with you. Give us a call. I mean, with the understanding that every time that we have to send a bill out, there's a cost associated with that, and it's gonna dwindle that number down even more. But I mean, I think, you know, if I'm riding on the horse of, you know, healthcare is a human right kind of a thing, which it is. I think that is, we need to be as sensitive to, we're running a business called the town, capital T, and that, but we also are here to serve the best interests of our citizens, the majority of which, as we discussed, are elderly, would have a hard time meeting these financial needs. So, yeah, I mean, I like the direction this conversation is going in. I would like to just kind of put a little bit of an emphasis of knowing that, like, $100, even an extra $100 out of somebody's paycheck every single month would be a hardship. So if we could give them a better net to fall in, that would be my preference.
Mm-hmm.
I would just quibble with the elderly. Almost all have Medicare.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm just saying it's been the focal point of who this is largely going to serve, this service and the numbers. But it's not. No, you're absolutely right. There are some people with pretty cushy health plans, but there are, and I'm not concerned about them. I'm concerned about the people who don't have the cushy health care, the Daniels of the world who have a $14,000 deductible, right?
Franz, or is this also a limp risk?
Well, I'm going to take off in a slightly different direction if Daniel has something more on this specific topic.
Yeah. So real concrete. So our billing provider, at my work, I experience people entering into payment plans and failing to keep them often. And one of the kind of like barriers is like, the payment plan is remember to write a check every month. And honestly, if people are struggling, you know, remembering to write a check every month is not always high on the list. So will our billing provider have the capability for somebody to say, do it through direct deposit or do it through a debit card, so that it can just come out automatically? Because, you know, we want the town to get reimbursed for the service that it provided, and we want it to happen as quickly as possible. And I think it's kind of worth pointing out that what we're talking here about payment plans is for those people for whom their insurance didn't just automatically reimburse, you know, $700 or what have you. Yeah. We're talking about the folks whose insurance is asking them, oh, you need to come up with all of this, and they want to pay it, but they're struggling. So some of those logistics from the biller would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to speak to that, with the contract for our billing company, they will accept credit or debit cards as well. I'm not sure if they'll be able to auto debit from an account like you mentioned, but that could be something we look into.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Liz, do you have another?
I just had a question. So these estimated collections, I just want to make sure that we're going to at least break even. Like, they're not compared to the costs of running the EMS for the year.
Sorry, ask your question again.
I don't see that. This estimated collection, would that be sufficient for our needs to run the EMS service for the year?
John, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we are not in a full cost recovery situation. So no matter, if you recall from the presentation that we made on the EMS, we weren't looking at what is the full range of costs behind that and then trying to set some cost recovery percentage that we were trying to do, because a lot of those costs are are sunk in the fire department. They're in the building, they're in the heat, they're in a lot of things there that is difficult to pull out, like how much do you put in for training, how much do you put for all these things. So we don't have a cost recovery goal. We have a kind of a which option was less costly to the town? Was it the one with a private provider that was going to charge us and then be setting these rates themselves to figure out their break even, or was it going to be the town, which we would try to get a reasonable, compassionate set of rates here and cover as much of our costs as we could. So no goal there for cost recovery.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Franz.
Well, one brief thing, and then taking off on what I think Liz was just asking about. The brief thing is there's a fail-safe mechanism, which is if you live here, you can at least defer payment or not pay at all if it's, if you're one of the people who's struggling and can't meet your monthly goal or whatever it is. There is a way out. So we're not going to be punishing people who really can't pay whatever their expenses are with regards to EMS. So it makes me worry a little bit less about the position that we're putting people in according to the amounts billed. But my bigger issue is, what Liz was just asking about is how much money do we need to take in to cover the expenses of this service? And as John just said, we can't line up all the expenses and all the revenues and say, we're making a profit or we're taking a loss on this. But we do have some numbers that tell us how much we need to get to cover the additional expenses of operating the service for a year, and we know those are in the $800,000 to $900,000 area in terms of the projections that our finance people have come up with. So all that's good. My concern is, where could that break down? Where could we end up with expenses that are not already built into the $800,000 or $900,000 estimates that we've come up with? And it seems to me that the place where that could happen is with regard to overtime, and it then relates to the policies that are in place for calling in personnel when there's excess demand. I remember, sitting in the emergency room in Keene and hearing these codes go out, code 1, code 2, code 100. A code 100, as I recall, meant everybody come in and we're going to pay you overtime for at least 2 hours. And the firefighters would be out in town doing their stuff at the grocery store, and their radio would go off. And there's a potentially significant drain on the finances every time that happens. So the question is, okay, so who's making that call? And how many people are they bringing in? And do we really have adequate control over that type of expense? So I recognize that we're a little bit deep in the weeds here. But in terms of, are we going to meet our projected expenses, or are we going to have to dip into tax revenues a year from now or 2 years from now? I'd just like to hear, what your thoughts are on that. It means that my predilection is to try to raise a little more money rather than a little less money through our billing structure here. It makes me want to go with the $1,400 instead of the $775 or whatever it is, because I think there's a possibility that we might otherwise end up with some financial pressure that we don't want to face in the future.
Okay.
Is there any kind? What do you think about that? The call-in procedures. I mean, how much have you thought about all that?
We thought about it a lot, but the call-in procedures is we leave that up to the officer that's in charge. He knows, depending on what the call is, why he needs more people. He may call in one person. He may call in 2 people. He may call in 4 people. So you don't. If I had a glass bottle that I could look in and tell you tomorrow I'm going to need to call in 4 people because we're going to have multiple calls going on at the same time. That would be great, but I don't.
But how much confidence do you have, looking at the year-long perspective of our budget deliberations? Do you think you can adequately predict that, or is there some supervisory mechanism where you're checking, well, did we really need that many people to get called in on this or that day? I mean, how confident are you that we're on target with that?
Overtime, I'm not very confident in because it depends on your call volume. I don't know how many fires I'm going to have in a year, so I don't know how many people I'm going to need to call in or how many hours, if it's a downtown fire and they're here for 15, 20 hours and over half of them are on overtime during that time. I can't predict that. COVID, I couldn't predict that I was going to have 3 people on the same shift out with COVID and I was going to have to backfill those shifts.
So there's uncertainty.
Right, exactly.
Okay. That's a good answer.
We try to pick a number and hope that's...
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I want to give the public an opportunity to speak on it. I think we've got some, or at least narrowing this a little bit. I think my last question before I do that is, do we know if there was a drop-off in, I guess I'm moving back to just collection policy. Is there a drop-off in basically like how much you're collecting once you pass a certain threshold of months? Like you've got the 3-month versus the 6 or the 150 days. Are we talking once you get past 3 months, suddenly the rate of collection drops pretty significantly and we're really just trying our best, but we're not getting much return? Or is it sort of consistent throughout? Do we know the numbers on that at all?
I don't think we have the data on that yet, and we won't really have that until this time. Next year we'll have 6 months or so of data. But I think with a lot of this, as you've seen, we've made some assumptions. We've tried to make the best hypothesis we can, and taken into account what lessons other people have learned, and that's where we've sort of come to this recommendation.
Okay.
So.
Okay, let's, I got David's hand's been up for a long time, so we'll go with him first, and then I see Dick, and then Gary.
Thank you, David Levenbach, District 3. About option 1 and option 2, it says residents with a balance after X number of days may be written off. But if I understood correctly from your presentation, after 150 days, or 90 days, they will be written off. So it's not a may, it's a will, correct? And then the second...
I can't speak for why it was written the way it was written, but I think in our discussion, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. And then the other question is, for non-residents, it says after X number of days, it may be sent to collections. And then the question is, who's going to make that decision? Or what are the criteria for making that decision? And I'm just going to throw in just one other thought, and this relates to Mr. Goodnow's suggested amendment about payment plans, and the discussion that came after that is you have a contract with the billing company. Are they open to payment plans? And because that means that's more administrative work. And for $35,000, I don't know if you can assume that the contract would cover that.
Thank you, David. I be willing to do that. So I guess that's a question that I'm putting to you all if the entity that we're contracting with would be able to do that. I think if the board is in agreement that that's what we'd like to do, then it would kind of go to you and you'd have to come back to us to let us know if that was not something that they could do. But I'm not sure even if we're at that point if the board's interested in that kind of payment plan. Dick.
Dick DeGray, La Quinta, California, second homeowner, Brattleboro, Vermont. I'm a taxpayer in Brattleboro, Vermont. I have an accident, you come and pick me up. Because I'm a taxpayer, I'm not a resident, I'm a resident of California. Would I be eligible for having my bill written off if I didn't pay the what my insurance didn't pay? And if no, why not?
How are you defining that you're not a resident here?
Because I'm a resident of California. We have a lot of second homeowners in Brattleboro, and they're taxpayers. And so if I'm here 3 months a year, I'm paying for everything that I don't get to use. And so the reality is, when you were talking about a non-resident has an incident, falls on the street, you go and pick them up, that's a totally different story than someone who's a non-resident but a taxpayer in the community. And so therefore, I believe that issue should be addressed just like a resident if you are a taxpayer, a homeowner in the town of Brattleboro, because you are contributing and you are actually using the facilities and everything else, the roads, less than someone who is a resident here 12 months a year, because you couldn't be here more than 6 months a year if you were a resident in one town. So
Yeah, that's kind of.
I would agree with what David said and what you said. That should be very clear if you're going to write that off. I am in somewhat of a disagreement of the 150 days because when we first started tracking the billing and I would ask questions and, for the first 30 days, that July, we didn't see any revenue. And so it was taking, 2-3 months. So now when you use 150 days, that's a long time. You're going to go 8-9 months of waiting for money, and you're not going to start billing for possibly 2 or 3 months. So you're talking 8 months. The payment plan, I would agree with you. I don't think you can set up a number. That's between the patient. I'm paying more hospitals than there are people on the board due to my fine health, and everybody gets a different number. And you're right, it's no interest. The hospitals are glad to get some money versus no money that they end up writing it off. So if you've checked with Golden Cross and they're amenable to people wanting to have payment plans. The other thing that I didn't hear really anybody talk about is the number of indigent people that we make that don't have addresses, that we make calls for and are providing service for. How do you plan to address that? If you could talk about that just a little bit. I probably have a couple of more questions, and I'll sit down, and if you give me an opportunity to come back up, that'd be great. If you answer those, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I think so again, on the Golden Cross, I'm saying I'm interested in the payment plan, but we'll need to make sure, and if that is the case, if they are, then and the board wants to go that direction, that's great. If not, then we need to have another discussion about it. I think I speak for myself, probably the, houseless people in town, indigent people in town who may use our services, those would probably be situations where those would be write-offs because there would probably not even be a billing address to send a bill to. I don't know if that's the case. I think it's probably a discussion for the board to have now. I don't know if other board members have thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that's a part of a bigger conversation to speak to Dick's first point about owning a second home here, but being a taxpayer, maybe it's just me, but that could just be a simple amendment to the language of saying a taxpayer and/or resident. I think, if that was the point you were driving at, but just a thought.
Yeah, that would be one way to do it if that was the will of the board. Liz?
I had just had a thought that my understanding that if a person experiencing homelessness gets brought to the hospital, I would assume that a social worker would open a Medicaid case for them, and then they would have Medicaid.
Daniel, can you speak on that?
Yeah, I think it's fair to point out that people who are without homes may not actually be without insurance. It's fairly easy to get on Medicaid. It's been hard to keep Medicaid recently after the pandemic wind down, but there's a lot of good work done in this town to make sure that people have health insurance, which is why we have a relatively low number of people without health insurance. And our revenue model was based on, I think, like maybe 4% of folks without insurance, and we expect very little reimbursement from those folks. So we're not building in some high expectation of uninsured people paying bills. So we could stand to have a bit of that.
I just wanted to echo what Liz said. She is correct. If the hospital plan person doesn't work with a person, I know Groundworks outreach program works with those people to get them on a Medicaid program. So she is correct that we will get some payment for that. So.
Okay, and then I think my question on the residents versus taxpayer, what's the, Bob, I feel like there's just a, statutory.
I think you could do the and or. The idea of having resident was to take into consideration people who don't own real property here should still be considered as part of the compassionate billing policy. So adding into that taxpayer and or resident, I think would cover that.
Okay. And if the board wanted to continue on the resident path, would that be if they were living here 6 months of the year? Is that how long?
Typically, it's residency isn't just one factor, such as 6 months or having a driver. It's a totality of the circumstances. But typically, people will look at that 6 months plus a day.
Yeah.
And Patrick points out a good point. It would be property taxpayer and or, not just taxpayer.
As the board considers that question, I think it's worth considering how much work we want to put into, and I guess it would probably be the billing company that would do this, but how much work it would go into sort of investigating that question as to residents, where it would be much simpler just to determine either they're a resident and not a property owner, or they own and they pay property taxes, and that would be a much easier sort of distinction to make versus sort of establishing residency if it's a totality of circumstance decision. So, other board members on that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gary. Yes.
I just, I talked about that just 3 months is not enough, and maybe 6 months is not enough, and I liked Dick's suggestion of 9 months.
Okay. Gary? Had his hand up next, and then I'm not sure. Then we got Kate, and then we'll have Bob.
Okay. Mic on? Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Okay, well, I was looking I'm on Medicare, Medicaid, Medicaid Advantages, and Medicaid. And from my personal experience with Medicaid, I don't know if you already know that since the enrollment is over with because of the pandemic, from what I'm understanding, when I called them, and basically from what I understand, 25,000 people who were on it are now off the Medicaid program, and that's about 60% of Vermonters. I called up because the urgency to have that information sent in right away. And when I called back, they said it'll be about a month before they can get my enrollment. And I said, well, in the meantime, if I'm billed, how does that work? So factoring that in, I was just wondering if you need emergency services or medications, then how are you guys factoring that into the equation of the amount of people that don't have it if services are needed? Because there's going to be overhead costs. There's going to be a lot of collections, I guess, from what I understand, because people are not going to have any coverage. And if you're making $40,000, you can't get privatized insurance. And if you're working, most insurances, most jobs, if you're working part-time, you're not covered or it's not enough. So that being said, I just wanted to know how you're going to calculate that into the equation as well, also being that many people without insurance. Thank you.
You, Gary. I think Daniel kind of spoke to that briefly, but about the change in some people losing that coverage, but then it also, I don't know.
I think what I took away from Gary's point is if you need an ambulance in this town, you'll call 911 and you'll get an ambulance. The insurance piece of it will get figured out afterwards, and that won't necessarily be the town figuring that out for you. But, you know, the fact that you needed an ambulance, but your insurance expired is then going to prompt you to kind of like figure that out with your insurer. I don't want to kind of speak about Medicaid too much because I'm not an expert, but I've heard occasions where, like, after the fact, you know, they were able to get their insurance, reinstated. But again, I'm not an expert.
Yeah, and we've, you know, I think from my understanding on the models that we've been looking at and reviewing over the last year and a half on EMS is that we're using the data we have on what the pool of users of the service are, and that's how we sort of developed our projections. And the uninsured rate is so low that I think, you know, maybe if there is an increase, we will see that impact, and we'll be able to reflect on it once we have data on that. But as of now, I feel confident that we're at least using data we're using information based on real data that we've collected based on past reimbursements from our pool. So, but I think it's a fair point, Gary, and we should. It's probably really what I'm saying is we got to keep a close eye on it and see how it impacts as we move forward, because healthcare is always changing. Kate.
Brattleboro. I just want to ask or make a little request that if you do vote on this tonight, you have a really blanket motion that just says accept whatever was presented. And if you do vote on it, if you could be a little bit more specific, because I didn't even know if you were talking about 1,400 or 770. So that's just from the peanut gallery, if you can make it more clear. And second of all, I just want to remind everybody that if someone doesn't pay the bill, like if you're a user of the system and you don't pay the bill, someone is going to end up paying the bill, and that's the taxpayers. And we have not experienced that before because it was Rescue who was absorbing when somebody didn't pay the bill. So I just want to, we're sort of talking as if no one's going to be paying the bill. And I get people might not be able to pay the bills, but somebody is going to be paying the bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for clarity on, at the moment, the motion is option billing and collection option compassionate A and rate option 1. So that would be the 150 days out on the billing with the resident option for basically dropping it after that. And rate option 1 was the flat 1,400. We've been discussing all around it. We haven't had a motion to amend yet. That's where we're at currently. All right, Bob.
Hello, I think I'm here. Bob Ozer, Brattleboro, can you hear me? Okay, so I think some of these questions have already been addressed, but one point of clarification. We talked about the reimbursement rate for rescue, and actually, if you look at page 86 in the AP Triton report, I think the discussion about the reimbursement was based upon the RFP, and the RFP was backloaded with a lot of other costs. So if you look at page 86 in the AP Triton report, the reimbursement rate was $534.03. And they did note, though, that amount was 58% less than what was billed as a national average when compared with a survey. So that's just a point of information. Going to Daniel's point, and I don't know, maybe too late in the game to ask this question, but while everything depends upon the insurance plan that you have, that is absolutely true. Everything depends upon that because, quite frankly, I have a very good plan, so they're only going to bill me $70. I checked on that. But for the insurers that we know about in Vermont, for Medicaid, certainly Medicare is easy. Medicaid, the various Medicare Advantage programs that exist in Vermont, can we determine what the least impact on the person getting the service would be based upon which model you take in? And I think that's where we're at. If you could hear that, I'm getting low bandwidth.
Your video is a little choppy, but your audio is very clear. I'll throw that over because I don't know if we have an answer to that. Is there, do we have a sense for a particular billing rate that would have the least impact for our individuals in our community who are on Medicare or Medicaid? Or is it kind of equal for all of them because it's billing at the same rate? Can I get an oral response?
Yes. So I was waiting for you to finish. I apologize. They have their standard rates of allowables, and we will be reimbursed the allowables. It doesn't matter what we bill. We will be reimbursed whatever the allowables are. Now, I would encourage people to make sure that they're aware of a lot of the bills that are currently being passed at our state and our federal levels, because some of that is up for discussion. It directly affects EMS reimbursements and how that will play out over the next year and 2 years and things like that. But those are set rates that it doesn't matter.
I think it was the second example you used in the presentation. There was one of the women who was on Medicare or Medicaid who was sent a bill. Mm-hmm. So can you explain that? So there are people who could be on one of those government services and would also get a bill? Medicare
covers 80%.
Okay.
Of the allowable.
Okay.
20% is billed to the patient.
Okay. So probably the answer to Bob Ozer's question would be for Medicare recipients, a lower bill to a rate. No, I'm not. I'm missing it.
Because the rate, the allowable is the same. So whether we bill $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, if the allowable is $500, that is the max that we will be able to bill someone with that. And then that 80%, that 80-20 comes up there.
But then are you saying that we bill them 20% of the total bill? No.
20% of the allowable.
So it won't matter. Okay, so it's always $500. Correct. It's always going to be 20% of the.
Correct.
Okay, so it won't not make.
And I'm just using these numbers as.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
An additional point is that many, if not most, Medicare recipients have a supplemental policy that will cover their deductibles.
Yeah.
I certainly do. I don't know that everybody does, but that's an additional level of insurance that goes along with Medicare.
And to speak to that as well, some people have multiple levels, right? You might have Medicare and Medicaid, and there's a primary biller and a secondary biller, and that's where the billing company will go through all of those. And just to be clear, the payers will be exhausted before an end user is ever sent a bill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very helpful. I appreciate walking through it again. Okay, so board. I think we've heard from everyone who's had their hand up right now. So where we're at currently is, and I haven't heard a motion to amend, is, and I just want to kind of walk it through with you all again. So the motion currently is to do the billing and collection option 1 compassionate A, which would be to have a bill sent at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, and 150 days. And at the end of the 150 days, that would be written off for a resident of the town or taxpayer. Oh, no. Right now, resident of the town and a non-resident with a balance after 150 days would be sent to collections. I think that's what I kind of understood our discussion to be.
Yep.
And then currently the billing rate option would be rate option 1, which would be all EMS transports would be billed at a rate of $1,400. EMS treat no transport would be for $110. Paramedic intercept for $150. Ground mileage $22 per mile. With an estimated collections of $900,490 and $885 or $949,885. So, further discussion, Liz.
I would like to amend that motion to extend the time period from 150 days to 9 months?
270.
270 days, thank you. And to add residential taxpayer to the resident.
Like
Resident.
Or
Or.
language.
Property taxpayer.
Property tax.
Property taxpayer.
Brattleboro property tax.
Property
Okay.
taxpayer.
So it'd be Brattleboro property taxpayer, or
And or
and
resident.
and or resident. Okay. I'm trying to think of who made the motion. I think Daniel made the motion.
No, I made
No.
the
Is
No,
that a
Peter.
friendly amendment to that?
Yeah, I mean, do we keep amending this at this point and come up with one thing?
I want
or
to start.
we-
I want to do one thing at a time for us to have a kind of clear sense of what we're voting
Yeah,
on.
works.
So
Okay.
let's just start there. Are you agreeable to that, or do you
I'm
want to?
agreeable to that.
Okay. So far, I'm willing to also. I'd like to also put in some language for payment plan, and so I think for clarity, what I'd like to say is that the billing and collection compassionate A would include. When a resident when anyone receives their first bill, included in that bill would be a payment plan option
0%.
with a 0% interest. And I actually would be fine with just leaving the language about like how long and everything, because I think the point is well taken that everybody's different, and so it would just be a payment plan with a 0% interest and leave it there. Are you agreeable to that too, Peter?
I am.
Okay. So that's where we're at so far. Ron's giving me a look.
It's a Robert's Rules look.
I know
Okay,
it is. I'm trying to be a little bit efficient here, unless we have a lot of disagreement on it. But I think where we're really going to have disagreement on is the rate option. So,
Well, I would like to maybe take a second to explore that thing. That I think I'm not suggesting that this concerns nobody else, but I think both Daniel and I, as to the initial billing
Okay.
that goes out for a service, I am with the understanding that that seems to satisfy the number we need to reach. With the understanding that we are able to then to charge or to change that, in a year or 2 years from now. I think if we're going to keep adding the word compassionate to the billing plans, I think we should have a little bit more of a compassionate number should somebody need to fall into a payment plan that gets them right out of the gate to a place where they can start at a lower number, should they need to exercise that option.
so are you advocating for rate option 2?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
If we're going to take a vote
We'll
on an
probably need-
amendment at this point, why don't we separate out the ones that everybody agrees on from the rate option, which maybe there will be more discussion.
Yeah. So I think do we want to? Can we actually parse this out and just vote on the billing and collections policy? Is that agreeable?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So, Daniel?
Can we put in that the select board will revisit this annually until such a select board
Right.
says, no,
Yeah, that's more or less what I was trying to say. Like, this would be the compassionate place to
Yeah.
start, and then we can also, as the select board, review that in 1 year's time.
Yeah, because
Is that agreeable?
There's two decisions, right?
There.
And decision one about the billing and collection policy will have an impact on the bottom line, maybe in a less obvious way, but we'll want to kind of take a look at that and see how it's gone for us.
I see your point. So if you wanted to look at them, you'd want to look at each of them.
Yes.
And if you wanted to look at them each, you'd want to look at them in a year. Okay. John wants to push back.
No, I just want
Don't read his
to
mind.
clarify that. So we'll be doing budget projections in August, September. So really not looking at it for a year and a half would probably be the appropriate thing, or, it's just, we're not going to be able to make a midstream change necessarily.
Yeah. I guess I'm
Looking
not
at-
saying 12 months from today, because
Okay.
this service isn't going to go into effect until July 1.
Right.
But there needs to be an annual check-in about are our rates and collections policies appropriate for cost recovery.
Yeah, and I'm agreeable to that happening in 18 months if that's what makes the most sense, that it falls within the budget cycle and process.
Okay. Liz?
I just would advocate for the rate option 1 of $1,400 because the compassionate care kicks in with the billing and collection.
I hear that. I think I want to I'm going to do that separately. Let's do, or I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood you.
Just,
Okay.
well, I can separate them.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just-
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. So sticking on the billing and collection option right now,
Right.
do we have any other questions or discussion on that? And then I would like to make a new motion just capturing this language. Franz?
If we're extending the billing period out to 9 months, I wonder whether it's necessary to send a bill every month for 9 months, because the frequency is mentioned as well as the ultimate length. So, to me, maybe it gets sent every other month or something, or maybe it could be a bit of flexibility in that. But, since sending bills out for 9 months seems like a lot.
Yes, but
Liz?
it's presumed that some of those bills will be paid within that time period. And a smaller number of bills would be ratcheted down to those that have not been paid.
You're so optimistic. No,
Well, I mean, I think the realistic nature of billing is if you owe money, you get a bill every 30 days until that bill is either resolved, written off, go to court, whatever. There's a paper trail of 9 months of billing.
So you think a monthly bills
I think
for 9 months
I
are okay?
don't think there's an option there. I think it has to go out every month.
I withdraw my comment.
Okay, fair enough. So at the moment, we're still considering a monthly bill at 9 months. And I see, Dick, you want to briefly speak on the billing specifically?
Yes. I think you're doing yourself a disservice by really lengthening this out, because the reality is if businesses, whatever, you get 90 days, and after 90 days, you're going to collections if you don't pay your bill. I think it's a detriment to trying to track your money if you go past 90 days. And again, you're saying 90 days, but it's going to be 90 days from whenever we get the check from whatever insurance company. So that could be, could be 120 days, could be 150 days. By using the whole 150 days, you could be up to 9 months. And so I really would like you to go to 90 days. I think that's fair. That first, like you said, in that first bill that you get, you're going to have the option for a payment plan. You're going to have other people that go, okay, I'm going to pay this right off. After you get 90 days, the next 2 bills, you're not getting any money. I can guarantee you that. So why cost yourself more money in billing and time when the reality is 90 days that's a long time. And so, and you're adding that time on when they finally get the insurance check. So I would hope that you would go back and put 90 days in there.
I thank you for the comment there, Dick. I've got a couple counterpoints. I think first is it's the billing company that's going to be doing it, not the town. And if they're agreeable to it, then I think it's interesting to potentially have this as an option so that we can see what kind of collection rate we get as we get further out past 90 days. My other point would be the vast majority of our billing is going to go at Medicare and Medicaid, right? So the 270-day bill collection is going to be a very small percentage of our overall. And so while I do agree that it will impact our ability to project our collection rate and what our actual revenue is, I think that the percentage will be so low that we'll have a pretty good idea of it. And if we're getting some money from this that we wouldn't necessarily if we didn't do it out that far, I think it's a judgment call for the board a year from now when they're looking at it to see, look, did you actually collect on any of these bills you sent out at the 270-day mark? And if it's like, no, you got none, then maybe you make a call then to move back to 90 days. But why not give us the option now to see how much you collect as you move out further, given the small amount of the total revenue that we're going to be making from it. Daniel?
Yeah, and just to put a real fine point on that, we would expect, I think, from our biller, and we haven't asked this from Golden Cross, but I think they could have provided us with this number, like how many dollars are 90 days plus overdue? How many dollars are 120 days plus overdue? You know, once we are engaging the biller in those services, I think it's reasonable that on a monthly or bi-monthly basis we're getting that information. So, you know, 6 months down the road, from July 1, we're going to have a picture of like how many dollars are sitting out there uncollected, you know, and that's going to inform future decision making by this and future boards.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Other board members? Yes.
Do we, I'm good with whether you pick 90 days or 150 days or whatever, but do we want to set a dollar figure to where, like at $50, if the bill's at $50, do we just at some point say, okay, we're not going to bother to keep sending bills for $50? Or?
Yes. This policy calls for $20, but I think probably $50 is more.
The proposed one in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have the page number for that?
No.
Where do you see that?
Yeah, it's right here. Is that in the South Burlington one? Yeah.
We didn't set.
You did not set one. Do you want to just, so Liz, your point's well taken. The South Burlington one was what you're referring to, which is page 49 of the backup material. So that says the billing company has the authority to write off any balance of $20 or less. Are you comfortable with that?
Might as well make it 50.
Why not?
50? Okay. Is that? I'm going to make a motion, and we'll, if it gets voted down.
I'm not going to quibble over $30, but I think if South Burlington feels like $20 is a reasonable write-off.
Are you suggesting that they're better than us, Dan?
They're a community that would not be wanting to throw too much revenue away because they've got a lot of expenses up there.
$20 it is. I'm like I said, Daniel said, I'm not going to quibble over $30.
Okay. Do we want to do the South Burlington one?
Sure.
Okay. So
we'll see how it goes.
Why should we be? Let's do 25. Let's be our own people.
What's Winooski do?
20. Okay. I think that's a really important point. Other discussion on just the billing and collections policy decision? All right, board. Not something I like to do often, but I'm going to make the motion here just because I want to capture all of the edits. So the motion I'm going to put to the board would be that we adopt a billing collection policy that reflects the compassionate A option as was amended in our discussion, specifically that the billing, the language reflects billing for town of Brattleboro residents or Brattleboro taxpayers, that the property is that what was the language? Property taxpayers, that the collection rate or collection policy go out to 270 days with a bill going out every month, that the billing agency has the authority to write off any balance of $20 or less on its own, and that when the first bill goes out to any individual who received service, that with that bill is the option for a payment plan with 0% interest. Any further discussion? Did I miss anything that we wanted to include? Yes.
Could I just ask the fire department if they're clear on those 4 things? Do we understand all that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
I think if you go to Golden Cross and they're like, we can't do one of these things, then I would anticipate you'd come back to the board so that we could reconsider.
Okay. Thank you.
I just looked at the public. All right, board. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's going to carry 5-0. So we're going to move on to further discussion on the rate option. What I'm hearing right now is some back and forth between option 1 and option 2, Franz.
Yeah, you were thinking that I was ready to speak on the...
Oh, yeah, I saw the...
No, it's just more random motion.
Okay.
My leaning right now is option 1. because of my concern about possible cost overruns in the service, and I would rather collect more money and dial it back after a year than collect too little money and have to make up the difference somehow.
Other board members? Liz?
I also am favoring option one because, as I just said, then the compassion is really up to the Brattleboro resident and/or property taxpayer themselves as to, the payment plan and when they terminate it.
Peter?
So I just kind of highlight a few things, and I think we probably all in this room have experienced it one way or the other. What I don't want to do is prohibit somebody from calling for emergency care because they know that the fee is going to be $1,400 because they already know that they're not going to be able to pay that, or they're not going to be able to work that out, or they're not going to be able to for whatever reason, so they just don't call the ambulance when they need them. That's what I'm trying to prevent. And I think by giving at least option two may not mitigate that a lot, but if it mitigates it just enough, then I'm a fan of that. I think that we need to think about how many times we haven't gone to a doctor because we just don't want to deal with the copay, and we don't want to deal with the expense of it, and we don't want to deal with having to pay the copay for a prescription medication. And I think that when we're making this decision here, at least in the initial year, and I know that the argument can be made in either direction, a higher one says we can go back, and a lower one says we can go higher based on the numbers we have. I think that we owe the citizens of Brattleboro this thing, and again, under the umbrella of healthcare is a human right, and I never want anybody to be reticent about calling for emergency care because they can't afford a $1,400 ambulance ride.
Thanks, Peter. Other Liz?
Well, I just see the $1,400 fee as allowing the town to collect the money that offsets the fee for people who cannot pay. And that if we can get the larger sum from private insurance and from Medicare and Medicaid, that really pays the way for writing off the people who cannot pay.
The board members, Daniel?
Yep, thank you. Counterpoint to Elizabeth here. The 13% of people, 13% of ambulance users in our time so far with working with Golden Cross have private insurance of varying qualities, right? And the trend has been in employer-sponsored insurance definitely for higher deductibles, crappier plans, basically, transferring costs onto the user. And it is those people that will be most impacted by the $1,400. The 70-something% of our ambulance users who have Medicaid and Medicare, we can bill them $1,400, we can bill them $14,000, and they're still only going to reimburse the specific dollar amount. So we're trying to kind of cover some of our costs off the back of those 13% of folks who are hardworking folks in our community, whose jobs don't give them good insurance, and I want to do something for them. And if in 1 year's time, if in about 18 months' time, we discover that our rates are too low and we are starting to impact the general fund too much, then this board that you and I will both be on will have a decision to make about, recalibrating. And so I'm also sensitive to Franz's kind of concern about cost overruns. And, this was the work that we did in the summer. We looked at models for revenue. We looked at models for operating expenses, startup costs, capital expenditure. And we chose this option with the low revenue estimate as a kind of way to kind of go in knowing that we did not have to go in with rates set this high because it could still work with the low estimate. And so I think for this first year, we should do the people of Brattleboro solid and pick option two. And then, in 18 months' time, we'll see how that went for us.
Franz? And then I'd like to
There's a balance point. And another concern I have is not getting reimbursement from insurance companies that we could be getting. We're clearly leaving money on the table from the private insurance companies if we don't bill them for the amount that we could get. So I really would like that money to go into our system. And I think there's enough safeguards built in for the people who would really have trouble paying their bill, whether it's by payment plan or by not paying the bill, or whatever there's no reason for somebody not to call an ambulance when they're sick. Based, the logical consequence of the argument that we always want people to call ambulances without regard for payment is, make it zero. Now, I know nobody's talking about that, but there's no cutoff number at which you can say, oh, well, then nobody is going to hesitate to call an ambulance. I mean, if you need an ambulance, call the ambulance. Pick up the phone, dial 911. We'll deal with the financial ramifications afterwards, including our compassionate billing policy. Nobody's going to get brought into a courtroom or taken off to the jailhouse. So call 911 if you need an ambulance, and everything else is secondary.
I think you're absolutely right. I think 1,000% you are correct. If you need an ambulance, you should call one. However, that is not how our healthcare system equates to our checking accounts. It just doesn't match. They don't align. People don't call. We've had it happen in my own household when I had a Cadillac plan. People just don't want to get that bill from an emergency service, so we end up taking people to the emergency rooms ourselves. So and again, I don't know that the difference between $1,400 and $770 is going to mitigate that, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And I think that we do, as Daniel said, owe the people of Brattleboro at least this small solid through all of this.
Chief?
Hey, you're still here.
I just want to reiterate what Rich from AP Triton said, and I talked to him the other day, and he said, whatever you do, tell them to do the $1,400 flat rate, because the only person you're helping is the insurance companies if you don't do it. That's the only people you're helping is the insurance company.
Liz?
So, the people of Brattleboro who require compassion and are unable to pay their bill, we've taken care of that in our billing and collection plan. No one is making anyone pay the full amount. And that's where the compassion comes in. So bill people on the front end and be compassionate on the back end, and everybody's happy.
I think if we could bill private insurance one number and the other people the other number, I think we're covered, but we can't. So we have
But
to
what
pick
about
a
the
number.
write-offs, Peter?
What's that?
The write-off.
What
You're
about it?
neglecting the idea that the bill that can't be paid gets written off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, but we don't want to get there. Right?
Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Well, neither can you.
All right. So let's see if there's any other. I just want to make sure. I want to give the members of the public an opportunity to speak on this last thing, and then see. What? Yeah, I mean, I think the motion currently is to consider option 1, I believe. Okay. But I can, there's been no amendment, I don't believe. I kind of bifurcated this motion into 2, but at the moment, the pending motion is to consider option 1. I see Dick's hand, and then I'd like to kind of get us to a place where we're ready to vote.
I don't know how you're going to vote yet, Chair. I don't think I heard you speak. So it's if you're scoring, it's 2-2. And I think what Fish was talking about is a real minority of people. When you have a medical emergency, you're not thinking about finances. You're going to call for an ambulance and worry about the finances later. So I would strongly encourage you to choose option 1, because if we do hit a financial snag, then as Kate talked about earlier this evening, we don't want this to fall back on the taxpayers. So if we're going to be reliant on insurance companies, which is at 13 or 14%, we need to get as much money from them as we can, because we are restricted from Medicare and Medicaid on what we can get from them and what we can bill them. So I would hope that you, being the swing vote, Mr. Chair, you vote for option 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. All right, so
Can I make one other point? Please. Right, by moving to a fire-based EMS, which we did, thereby eliminating a charge of X from an outside service, and being able to bill on our own should be mitigating this and saving the town money just on that premise alone, right? If we're billing, I mean, right now we saw numbers that show us recouping 87%. I don't know how sustainable that is, but I think that already puts us ahead of paying that third-party ambulance service now. So my point is, no matter what direction we go, we're going to be heading in a trajectory up and to the right. No? Am I miscalculating all of that?
So I think there's a slight miscalculation in there. I think the 80-something percent. So as far as I understand, this is going back to the report numbers, sorry. It's like, here's what we received during FY24, and here's what's been billed. But some of that stuff that's been received was actually billed in FY23, because, it takes a while to come back. So, it's rolling. It's always rolling. I mean, Dick asks this question,
right?
And it's just this. It's a rolling period. The only months that aren't rolling are those first few months where we see like this real slow start for the revenue, and then it comes in, and then it, Superintendent Fritz was talking about how it's coming in pretty steadily now, but it's not like we billed. I don't know what the exact numbers were. 900,000, and we received 800.
Right.
We have billed 900,000 in FY24, but that 800 that was received, maybe only say 600 of it was from FY24's actual billing.
Mm-hmm. But doesn't it just keep rolling forward?
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get rolling with this, and we'll see what our revenue numbers look like. And if they're not at the rate that we need them to be, the board will need to reconsider.
Franz? We heard from the chief that there's uncertainty about the expense side of this service. We haven't done it before. And my concern is that the place where we're at risk in establishing this service is financially. I think we're going to have a great ambulance service. I think we're going to have the right people on those ambulances to deliver the best possible services to the people of our town. I'm less confident that we're necessarily going to, I'm hopeful, but I'm not fully confident that we're going to generate the revenue that we need. And, I've talked to a bunch of people about this who are in the ambulance business, and they all say that's where you could get hurt. And it's specifically in the overtime budget based on factors that are not predictable, and I don't want to put us in that predicament. And I think the safeguards are in place to protect people financially on an individual basis, and that we also need to protect the town financially on an overall basis, and that it makes sense to me to do what AP Triton says, which is bill them $1,400, get the money from the insurance companies, and then you can, everything else will work out one way or another. And I think we've got those other methods in place to make it work out.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think at the end of the day, I understand that I'm the swing vote, Dick. I just have been really considering it, and I wasn't anticipating so much discussion on this, so it's been really important. Oh, Daniel, you want to talk now?
No, I can help you out.
No, I think I think the right move is to go forward with option one, and I think the reason why is because we look at it in 1 year, we provide ourselves with more financial security. There's still question there, because it's a new program and a new system, and the reason I'm anxious to do one is that I don't see us cutting rates. Mm-hmm. So I would almost rather go with two and then raise them in a year. But I worry that it could be, we don't know how risky that is. And I would rather err on the caution side, given the fact that the people, and I'm part of the group that we're talking about.
I know.
So I think that given the percentage of individual, it's basically making a call between different residents in the town and who it's going to impact, which is basically everything we do in this role. So I think I'm landing more on the side of option one, just because of what I've said, and that I would really like to make it clear. And I don't know if, John, you need it as a vote or not, but I think the board should consider this as soon as it can in the next year, and have a serious discussion as to the rates. And that's where I land. So I think I'm ready to move the motion unless we have any other discussion. Daniel, you can just drag me through the mud.
No, you're good. Because, I'm sitting here and I don't want to be intellectually dishonest, right? If it was a $1,400 rate and the collections policy was, you better pay that bill in, 60 days or we're sending you to collections, then I'd have a real problem with it.
Yeah.
But we got a collections policy that says, hey, ignore us for 6 months and then we'll write it off. And I don't love saying that out loud about time finances, because we went through a lot of things to kind of get to where we are today with this ambulance service, and I would hate for it to fail just because we had a sort of overly, I don't know who I am right now, but some sort of overly generous collections policy. I don't think that's going to happen. The vast majority of the users of our service are on government insurance that pays very clear, predictable amounts in timely manner, I'd imagine. So we're talking about a small number of users. The collections policy is acceptable to me. We all voted for it. We'll see how it goes. If I use an ambulance and I have my $8 million deductible, I'm going to sit on that bill for a really long time before I think about paying it. And, so we'll see how that really impacts our bottom line in about a year's time, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Other board members? All right. I think in that case, the bifurcated motion is, the second part is to adopt a rate option for a flat billing rate that would be EMS transport at $1,400, EMS treat no transport at $110, paramedic intercept at $150, ground mileage at $22 per mile, and estimated with an estimated collections of $949,885. Board members, all those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It's going to carry 3-2. I'm going to make a final motion that the board consider both policy decisions for the billing and collection rate, collection policy, and the billing rate policy by July 1st of 2025. Is there any discussion? Liz?
I was just voting for it.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that clear, and is that the right date for us from a budget point of view?
Yeah, I believe it is, and with having the right information.
We'll have a year's worth of.
We'll bring it forward. Yep.
Other discussion on that?
Daniel and I will vote on it.
I guess.
Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll carry 5-0. Okay, we've gone quite over when we usually take a break, so let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back at 8:40.
Do that. that.
Well, I appreciate everyone who has stuck around to continue the select board meeting. We're moving on to new business agenda item 8D, which is the trash collection procurement discussion.
Yay. I love talking trash.
Yeah, municipal services.
I'm good at it.
Talking about essential municipal services. So I think I'm going to turn this right over to the assistant town manager, Patrick Moreland.
All right, thank you and good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So I will take a few minutes and summarize what's in the backup for this evening's meeting. But I think the place to start is by being really clear and specific about what's being requested. And so staff is here this evening seeking select board authorization to procure solid waste collection services for the town's curbside collection program using a request for qualification process that will lead to eventual contract negotiations. I think another good place to start is talk a little bit about the town's curbside collection program. Brattleboro is a little unique in this with this type of program. Many other towns, many of our surrounding towns don't have any sort of solid waste collection program. They're a little too small potentially. But then even other towns of a similar size, take Montpelier, doesn't have any role, the city of Montpelier doesn't have any role in the collection of solid waste. That's left up to each individual household. Brattleboro decided a number of years ago, before I started working here, that it would be a better idea to have a single sort of unified collection. I think the idea being that there would be better pricing by grouping thousands of individual households together. And I think that makes good sense. And some of the other reasons were that there are fewer trucks on the road and thus a lower carbon footprint for the program than were there to be a bunch of different companies each going down each road at different times. And so there are a number of reasons why the program is a good and productive service to the community. Currently, the program serves about 2,950 single-family homes, 390 mobile homes, 263 condominiums, 222 apartments, and 21 farms. Roughly 3,850 locations. So it's a pretty good size program. The specifics of the current program today, which have changed a lot over time, and I'll get to that in just another minute, include weekly collection of recycling and organics, every other week collection of trash, a twice in the spring and twice in the fall yard waste collection, no large item collection program of any kind, and with our trash program, we employ a pay-as-you-throw model that incorporates the use of specialty bags that are available at various retail locations around town, but that, you must purchase these bags, put your trash in those bags, and that's what you need to be putting out on the curb. That's the program as it is today. In an average year, we see a collection of about 864 tons of trash, 1,055 tons of recycling, and 657 tons of organics, all delivered to Wyndham Solid Waste Management. Now, this current program, the one I just described, has not been the same over the last dozen years. It has changed many times and in substantive ways. And this has been possible because the town has had a positive and collaborative working relationship with the hauler, that being Triple T. If you think back in 2014, we worked with Triple T and we started a new pilot program for the collection of organics that was also at no cost. In 2015, we implemented pay-as-you-throw. That's when the bag system came into play. Again, this was implemented at no cost. In 2016, at a savings to the town, we implemented the every other week trash collection. So this program and the citizens of Brattleboro have been evolving, like I say, in significant ways over the years. When Wyndham Solid Waste Management closed their materials recovery facility, we were able to successfully negotiate with Triple T to have our recycling taken to the next closest MRF and to have our organics maintained to the Wyndham Solid Waste Management. That was particularly tricky because Triple T had purchased and built a whole fleet of trucks that were dual collection, recycling and organics. And if there was no reason for them to be going to Wyndham Solid Waste Management for recycling anymore, then it also made a bit of a burden for them to be going over there for organics. So a little bit of working with our partner to develop an appropriate solution is something that has been productive for the town for many, many years. So, in essence, what we're seeking is a willing partner, somebody who will sit down with us, will negotiate with us, will help to evolve the program as the board and the public inputs over time. And so we're looking for that collaborative relationship, a partner in solid waste collection. And that's why we're proposing this particular method of procurement. We're asking questions about their willingness to cooperate with us. We're looking for interest from, stop video. The reason I do that, by the way, is to try and keep the fewest number of cameras on the screen as possible. That helps to keep the interpreter more prominent. And it's I think more useful for folks.
Absolutely.
So sorry for that. So the other reason why we're recommending this particular model of procurement is because bidding lends itself to a service that is very clearly defined, and this is a program that changes, and it's one that we see the potential for significant changes coming in the future. For many years, Triple T has expressed to us a desire to transition to automated collection. Automated collection can be a good thing, and it can help to save money by reducing the number of staff on any given truck. It also has a tendency to reduce the number of workers' compensation claims by staff. So it is a method of automation that has the ability to reduce costs. That's one thing we know is coming. We know, anybody who's working in this industry is interested in seeing that type of thing move forward. Beyond that transition, however, there are a number of things that it may be worthwhile for this board to take another look at as we move forward into the future. And those are outlined and dealt with individually in the memo. I'm not suggesting we dive deeply into any of these tonight, but I would like to touch on some of them. Our current curbside collection program is limited to residential properties. It is not inclusive of commercial residential properties. And I want to make clear that it's not just commercial residential properties for 25-unit buildings, but even if a commercial property has 1 or 2 units, that's a commercial property. The defining feature of who's in the program versus who's outside of the program is the designation that that property has from the assessor's office. And so if it's a commercial property with 1 unit, that's a commercial property. It's not in the residential program. I would suggest we probably keep it that way. Past boards have looked at this and said that solid waste collection on a commercial property is a legitimate business expense and shouldn't be underwritten by the local taxpayer. I think that makes sense, but it's certainly something the board could consider and take a look at. Another question that might be worth revisiting, not necessarily changing, but certainly revisiting, is how often should trash be collected? We've been able to get by on every other week trash collection, and if you're very aggressive in your use of recycling and organics collection, that can work for you. But there are some households, maybe not that many of them, but some for which that doesn't work. Namely, households with diapers, whether it's young children, the elderly, anybody who's got that as an issue. 2 weeks of collected diapers in a bucket anywhere near your house is not something you're going to be very fond of. And so whether or not we choose to maintain every other week trash collection or switch back to weekly trash collection, something that the board may want to consider. Large item collection. This is an issue which has been brought up again and again. At this moment in time in Brattleboro, if you've got something you want to throw away, it's got to fit in one of those pay-as-you-throw bags, and a sofa doesn't, and a mattress doesn't, and a this, that, and the other doesn't. And so there really isn't any sort of municipal service designed to address that need. At the time when we were working with Triple T, they indicated that they didn't have appropriate vehicles in order to be able to do that safely, and so we really weren't able to develop a program. We've had conversations with other hauling services, and we believe that there are others out there who could work with us and to develop a large item collection program. And then finally, the manner in which we've chosen to comply with the state act that requires pay-as-you-throw, we have relied upon the bag system. It's worked. It's worked pretty well. But I think everyone hates it. And,
I don't hate it.
There may be other options for us in working with a new solid waste hauler. There may be other ways to get at the same end result. And so for all of those reasons, we would like to attempt to procure our next solid waste contract in a manner that really is intended to identify a vendor or a contractor that's looking to be a partner with us and to really work through these issues with us. And so that's the request before the board this evening.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for that presentation. Board, can I get a motion? Peter.
I'll motion to authorize the staff to publicly solicit a request for qualifications and letters of interest from qualified solid waste contractors.
Thank you very much, Peter. Board members, questions, comments? So essentially, before the board is also what would be essentially the language in a request for qualifications that you would be putting out. Is that my understanding, Patrick?
Yes, sir. That was included in the board backup. It wasn't necessary that, we weren't necessarily seeking you to approve it, but if there was edits that you would like to share with us, we'd be happy to incorporate that.
But if the board were to vote in favor of the motion that Peter just made, we would be approving the language that was in the backup material tonight. Do I understand that?
We would be moving forward with that language. Yes.
Great. Okay.
And specifically, so that's on pages 58, 59, and 60.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, 50, yes. Sorry.
Okay, so that's what would go out. I mean, you've got a draft of the RFQ right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Board members, I've got a couple of comments. I want to commend the town staff for including the large item pickup. I don't think I was the first select board member identified in this. What?
No, then go ahead.
In the backup material, it referenced 2018, which is before I was on the board. I definitely brought this to Peter Elwell when I first joined the board because this, in my opinion, is like a perfect example of where there's a need within the community that is not being provided by by private entity at an affordable cost. And there are individuals in town, renters or people living here who have large items, and because they can't pay to get them, removed because it can be really expensive, it just ends up on the street, and then it impacts everybody. And I watch dressers slowly sort of rot as they get wet and fall apart and stuff. And I just really believe that this is a real place where the town could now get a contract with somebody who could actually provide this service, and it would greatly impact, I think, how the town looks and a service that people can utilize. Where we know from past work that we have a large number of renters in town who are, greatly impacted by just paying their rent. let alone having to pay a service to get rid of mattresses or things that you have when you're trying to move from one place to another. So I really appreciate that, and I just wanted to make that point. And my other one was just, I wanted just to put voice to something else that we've heard in the past on this, is that not only diapers, but also individuals in our community who have medical waste, so who are, are producing that type of material, and they have to throw it away. And with the system we currently have, we've heard from people who have presented that that is a real impact to the every other week trash throwaway. I just wanted to put that out there. So with that, I'll turn it over to other board members.
I would just, I like the idea of something, being able to pick up the mattress, the sofa. I often have been baffled as to why that just hasn't been part of the service, but I get it, because
Me too.
I will take you right to where it all gets tossed, and it's right at the bottom of my road.
Yeah.
So.
And maybe, and it could be something where it's quarterly or twice a year or something, where and we could make it a point to advertise it so that people know. I don't really know what the system would be, but there are a lot of ways that we could.
May and October, baby.
Yeah. And I really think it could be really good. So anyhow, Liz.
I just want to reiterate Ian's point about diapers and medical waste. It really is a hardship for many people.
Franz.
I want to uniterate Ian's point about large items. I'm very skeptical of that. I would look at what the proposal is, but I think basically what you need is a guy with a pickup truck, and who in Brattleboro doesn't know a guy with a pickup truck? But I mean, I wonder, can you expect people to hold on to a sofa for 6 months until large item pickup day comes around? I think those things are going to end up on the street anyway. I mean, all I'm saying is I need to see the details of a program like that before I would jump on board.
So my pushback would be, yeah, absolutely, Franz, but right now there's no system.
Yeah, thank you.
Right now, it's just it ends up on the street because there's nothing to do.
But show me how it's going to make a difference. And you see, I think that the contract should be with a separate hauler, not with this hauler, that we should contract with guy with a pickup truck or, person with a pickup truck to do this as a separate service that would then be available but would be paid for by the people who need to throw their sofas away.
I don't think it starts until we start having the conversation.
Well, right. No, I'm totally in favor of the RFQ. But I'm just saying, since you jumped right in with, yes, let's have a big item pickup, I'm jumping in with maybe have a big item pickup, but let's think about how it would work.
Great. I also think it's important to think about how things work. Daniel.
Hello. So, yeah, I think it's good to have a public process about this kind of procurement. Thank you for doing that. I hope that the timeline allows for a kind of thorough investigation. I'm a little concerned that we might not have enough time before our current contract expires, but we shall see. As far as large item pickup goes, I hear both sides. I have not had to do it often, but I have, sought the services of a guy with a truck I know, and then I get a dump sticker, and then they weigh the truck somehow. I don't know how it all works. So we do already have some of that service in town, and maybe it is more of an entrepreneurial thing that there are some folks in the community with vehicles that can pick up those things that could be saying, hey, I can provide that service. Much in the same way that we think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a better taxi service? There's a reason why those businesses don't seem to take off here. It's a volume thing. But then the question is, does the town need to be the one that's, footing the bill? We'll see. We're going to go out. We're going to procure. Yeah. Hey, I thought that's where we were. It seemed pretty wheezy to me.
But until then, can we just put stuff in front of Franz's house?
He knows a guy with a truck, so you pay him $30 and he'll take care of it.
Any other points on that, Daniel?
No, it's all great. Thanks.
Other board members before I turn it over to the...
I just want to say that My husband thinks going to the dump is the best thing about living in Brattleboro.
There you go.
I think I want to just echo Daniel's point about public being engaged, especially in consideration of changing the pay-as-you-throw to like a different method that maybe isn't bags or something like that. This municipal trash pickup is like one of the ways that many residents interact with the town, maybe like one of the only ways they do, depending on, what they do. And so it will impact everybody if we change it. And so I really want to make sure that we hear from the public on it as this process moves forward. And I think it's important to relook at these things too, right? This system has changed as Patrick presented on. And so I think it's good to look at it again, but I want to make sure that we hear from the public and we make sure that if we're really going to look at a new system, that system is addressing the needs of people for their waste pickup now.
Okay.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy's had her hand up for a long time, patiently. It's not Nancy. It's Frank.
My favorite Nancy.
Frank, did you call on you?
No, Patrick knew who I was, but Nancy would be, I think, very in favor of the large item pickup because I'm the guy with the pickup truck, and I'm the guy who Brian calls when someone leaves a piece of broken down furniture near one of my properties. But and then I go to the dump, and then I come back with half as much as I went with of other stuff. So. Anyway, as to the large item thing, I agree with Franz. The devil is in the details. Places that do it, I think, usually do it somewhat more frequently than twice a year, like the yard waste thing is happening now. But I'm not sure we have enough to justify, doing it once a month like some other places do. So that would be a nice thing to consider. The area that I'm particularly concerned about is the who gets picked up and who doesn't. Historically, everybody got their trash picked up. And then at some point, the select board decided that quote unquote commercial properties, even if they were residential, would not get picked up. But their recycling still got picked up. And suddenly we had a much better recycling rate. It was very exciting to those who were, counting those things. But it was all, a sleight of hand. It wasn't really an improvement. And the net effect of not picking up everybody's trash has been to reduce our recycling. And I hold out as evidence the fact that I personally have been trained from an early age to make sure everything gets reused or recycled if at all possible. And what beat that out of me was the fact that I had to get 2 dumpsters. And and then, recycling stopped getting picked up. And I had a bunch of tenants, many of whom did not have vehicles and could not bring recycling to the then available spots for recycling by the high school and West Brattleboro Firehouse and so on, which, as far as I know, don't even exist anymore. So there is no reasonable way for a majority of my tenants to recycle. And when they are actually concerned about it, I say, put it in front of somebody else's house or, just throw it in the dumpster because we don't really have another good choice. I talked to Peter at Triple T way back, I don't know, a few years ago. And I said, how much more would it cost with pay as you throw now to just pick up everybody's stuff instead of passing by some houses and some businesses? And he said it wouldn't cost any more. we got to drive by them anyway. With the fact that we have pay as you throw, the tipping fees are covered. So there is, near as I can tell, no reason why we couldn't pick up a colored bag from in front of a business as easily as we could pick it up from in front of a regular single family or a 5 or 6 family. And I think it's time to, to stop dumping on businesses who are paying their taxes just like everybody else and have paid for, would have paid for the service if it was a service that needed to be paid for, but we're covering that as far as I understand through the pay as you throw. So, it feels like a lot of double dipping on people who you guys have decided can afford to be taxed again for something we're already paying for.
Thank you very much, Frick. I think that my understanding is for the RFQ, this would be an element, would be consideration, or as the process moved forward, could be a consideration as to what households trash pickup could happen, correct?
We would have a discussion about, should there be a change in the scope of the properties that are involved, the pros and cons, hear from the public, et cetera.
Yep.
This is about trying to procure who we're going to work with.
So, Frick, stay tuned. If the board votes in favor tonight to move forward with this process, then we will actually have an opportunity to have that discussion about which households in the future after we figure out who we could be working with. So, with that, Gary?
It's like Gary.
Unless it's not Gary.
Could be
It's Frick.
Could be
It's Frick again.
It's not Nancy, so that's fine. Hey, Gary Stroud, District 2 Chair. I got good news that might help you out. Ian, you've been down to Goodwill, correct? Goodwill does V-Cycle. Bring your electronics, your laptops, your TVs, anything, any other items, electronics, and we will take it with no pay and give you a tax receipt. We take furniture, all that. We repair it, we distribute it, we give it to other people who have needed it. Now, we won't take your trash, but we will take your furniture. We will take your, I expect them and price them at a reasonable price and then distribute them, or we donate them to families in need. We fix them up and, work alongside with SEPC and other agencies and families that are coming here too. So that might alleviate what you were talking about with furnitures being left on the street, dresses and all that. I work in the donation center down there. As soon as you drop it off, I price it, I put it right out. I expect it to make sure everything's good. I can drop off a list to Patrick or to whomever, and that can be posted up, or I can introduce you to the people who deal with that, with V-cycling, with furniture, electronics, and with clothing and all that. So that might help alleviate some of the excess out there in the street, if the town is willing to work alongside with Goodwill as well. Thank you.
I don't see other hands in the Zoom, and I look to the room. I don't see any hands in the room. Well, board, we've had some good discussion on this. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? The pending motion before the board is for the board to authorize staff to publicly solicit a request for qualifications and letters of interest from qualified solid waste contractors.
I'd like to make that motion.
Oh, did we not make the motion yet?
We did
Did
make
we?
that motion.
Yeah, we did.
I'd like to second that motion.
Yes, no second.
We don't need a second in the small rules,
I know
but
we
that's
don't
fine.
need it, but I can still do it.
So Franz is seconded. Board members, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate with an aye. Aye. That will carry 5-0. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to new business agenda item 8E, which is to assign motions for RTM. All right, so board, we approved the RTM warning back at the end of January, and now is the opportunity for us to make a motion to approve the warning, the motions, and I think what I'll do is wait till we make the motion until we've actually assigned the motions. Who's going to make each one?
The motions or the articles?
They are actually motion. They're I guess they're the articles. They're not really the
I'm
motions.
confused.
They are. Was it?
It's the motion.
It's the motion that goes with the article. So each select board member will make a motion that goes with each article. What I'd like to do is assign those, and then I'll take a motion tonight to vote in favor. Yes.
Well, can't we just do it on a rotating basis?
That's what I'd like to do. And what I'd like to do usually is just start at this end.
No.
And then
I'd like to go-
down.
Here's how it starts. It
I think we should
chair,
do-
vice chair, and then
I think we should do it by height.
Chair, is that how it usually goes? Okay. So
Alphabetically by
chair, vice chair, then
Clerk.
clerk, and
this
then
guy,
Ladies
and then
last?
John, and then
Ladies
John does
last.
one as well.
No, John doesn't do it.
Oh, come on.
Okay, so and then I look to John and I say,
I'm
okay, John,
five.
can you
I
do
think
that
Kim
right
could
now?
do
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, so it's going to go Ian, Franz, Peter, Daniel, Liz.
So starting with the preliminary motion, not with the article. Somebody's got to move the preliminary.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
you gotta have all of them.
You're right.
Yeah. Ian, prelim one.
Man,
Okay.
Well, why can't we just keep the same rotation?
We will. It just,
Just gotta-
John started writing already.
I got it.
Oh, John, unright.
And then we had the fun task of seeing who got the really long human services.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Article 10.
I want.
I've had it the last 3 years, I think, or 2 years.
I think it's me. So who's fourth? We don't know.
Daniel.
Daniel.
Daniel is.
This is really great TV. The board silently wrote down things on a piece of paper. Is that even okay?
This is so non-transparent.
So, to move, okay, so once we have those all assigned, we also have an opportunity board to talk about the proposed language for each of the motions. And if we wanted to make edits now, we could, before we adopt it.
Sorry.
Yes.
Does somebody have to move Article 7 for the vote by Australian ballot?
No.
No.
So we skip that.
Yeah.
Skip it, yeah.
You're only on Article 7?
Well, I'm just trying to get it right.
All right. Finished.
Who got 10?
You did.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you did. That's your reward.
Possible.
That's your reward. For...
That's the luck of the draw.
If you did Article 7, then
You
it would have
will
been
not
me.
get it the following year, I guarantee you.
You might. You never know.
Yeah.
Weird could happen.
Yes, something really strange could happen.
Cannot believe I got that again. It's very fun. Okay.
But then you can speak to it.
Yeah, that's true. So I think probably the only article that I wanted to make sure that the board at least discussed briefly was 16. Currently, it's who has it?
16, Franz.
Me.
So Franz, currently you would move to direct the select board to allocate to human services funding in the FY26 budget in the amount equivalent to up to 1.4% of the FY25 budget. My understanding for why it's proposed like this from town staff is just this is the number we've had every year that we've had this motion. We just do the 1.4. It's changed multiple years, and we just give RTM a starting place to discuss at 1.4%. I think we can do whatever percent you want. It's currently from the board's from the RTM's vote last year. It's 2%, up to 2%. So we could start there if you wanted to. You could start lower than 1.4%. You could do 1%. Yeah, it's entirely up to us. Or we're fine with 1.4. But I thought there was some discussion about this article, not this motion, when we were discussing the wording of RTM, and so I wanted just to highlight this to make sure we had an opportunity to discuss it now.
I'm fine with it.
Fine at 1.4?
Can I pull a number out of a hat?
Right before?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And the number is?
No,
as long as
this
that number's
was not
1.4.
out of a hat.
Okay, I'll pull 1.4 out of a hat.
There we go.
Okay.
No hat. Just
Yeah,
1.4.
I think at this point,
No, this is what, if it were up to me, that's what I would do.
well, it is kind of up to you. sort of.
Well, kind of, sort of.
We
but-
need to approve this.
A fifth of it is up to you.
No, I think it should be up to everybody.
Yeah.
I think this is a group decision.
Look at you.
But
So-
It used to be up to three of us.
So I think I think the 1.4% is what RTM has had, and so.
But RTM can change it. I mean, it's
Well, and
perfectly
they have
amendable.
before.
So yeah, so I don't think it's a problem really.
Yeah, and I think the other reason why I'm agreeable to it is that it's shown that starting at 1.4% has not like squashed debate or kept them from really working with it. Well, sometimes what?
I'm just like, were you there?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that. So I think it's good to just start with a number and then let the debate happen.
Yeah, we could start with 0.0014. And
Well, it depends on how long you want to have this conversation.
Yeah.
You start at a reasonable point. I think you end at a reasonable point.
So we're done. We're fine with 1.4 for Article 16. Board, are there any other motions for the articles that you wanted to discuss or you didn't like the language on?
No.
And I'm going to make sure the public has an opportunity if they have any questions.
Yo, public.
And I don't see any hands
All right.
on Zoom right now.
Just vote it.
Okay, in
real
that
quick,
case,
real quick. Now.
I would take a motion, Board.
I move to accept the motions for the 2024 representative town meeting.
Daniel's made a motion to accept the motions for the 2024 representative town meeting. Any further discussion, Board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
That'll carry 5-0. Okay, so we're going to move on to new business agenda item 8F. And for the careful viewer at home, you'll recall that earlier in the meeting, we pulled an item from the consent agenda, 7C, which is the disbursement of American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds. So now we will consider that in the new business. And I will turn it over to John.
Sure. So if you approve the recommendation here, you would be approving an administrative transfer of $2,757,275.47 in ARPA funds into the general fund and applying that to payroll in order to implement the priorities that you approved back in January. I want to emphasize that this doesn't change any of the allocations that you made then. It just means that we will avoid not meeting any deadlines and make sure that we never have to return any of the funding. So this action would be for accounting and reporting purposes and reducing risks to the town.
Thank you very much, John. Can I get a motion, Board?
What sound like? Liz?
Is there a proposed motion in the amendment? Liz?
Yeah, to approve. I move to approve the transfer of ARPA funds totaling $2,757,275.47 into the general fund to pay for staff salaries in FY24.
Great. Liz made a motion, Board. Further discussion, questions? Liz?
Yeah, I'll speak to it. I just want to note for the public that this is merely an accounting or reporting action so that we can make sure that we receive all our ARPA money and then we will disperse it as we already decided.
This is merely a post-it on the mirror to remind you to do something. That's all this is.
Franz?
And we've talked about this for quite some time. This is not a new proposal. It's been talked at several board meetings in the past that this was a good way just on a bookkeeping basis to make sure that we have the flexibility in the timing of how the funds are spent, so that the original ARPA money came with deadlines, and maybe we'd meet those deadlines, but now we don't have to worry about it if we move this money into a special fund that then will be used specifically for the ARPA purposes, we're not doing anything with this money that wasn't already envisioned in our ARPA discussions and meets the criteria for ARPA spending, even though those criteria have been relaxed. But we're still going to use the money for the same things. This is something that we're doing to make it easier to do that, and that I understand that people had a lot of questions about this. We got some emails, etc. So having this longer discussion rather than including it in the consent agenda makes sense to me. but I think we're all on exactly the same page with the fact that this is the right way to do it.
Daniel?
Fran said we're going to use the money for the same things. Wrong. We're going to use these $2.75 million for staff salaries, and then the $2.75 million that would have gone to those staff salaries will be used for those ARPA projects.
Correct.
Right? I think that's what people are confused by. Like, it feels like a shell game or something weird, but like, for people who have been listening, it has been something that's been talked about as like, Patrick's often explained it very well, and I'll butcher it now.
You're
but
doing
it's
pretty
like,
good.
The guidance said that ARPA funds could be used for governmental expenses, right?
Yeah.
It's basically the short version, and this is us doing that. And the money that we would have spent on those staff salaries is now freed up for the other things.
And I think it's also
exactly right.
And I think it's important to note too that this isn't like a sort of like scheme that town staff sort of like came up with. This is, we're being advised by Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns that this is a method to basically use ARPA funds so that you make sure you don't have to return any of it and make sure you've allocated it and that it's a sound financial way to utilize the COVID relief funds. So we rely on VLCT for advice and information on all sorts of matters throughout the year. And so I think that this is just another instance where we use their expertise and we allow it to impact how we work, especially with federal monies. And then a little peek under the hood for the agenda setting committee, we just knew that there was other things to discuss tonight that were pretty substantial and may take some time. Even though this is kind of interesting and could warrant some discussion like we're having now, we thought, it's probably worth putting it on the consent agenda given the fact that we've discussed it a number of times in the meeting. But then I'm glad that Franz pulled it because we did get some interest and questions about it from the public before the meeting. And I'll look over to hands in the room or hands in Zoom. I see Bob Ozer. Let the yelling begin.
So Bob Ozer, Brattleboro. In one of the follow-up emails, I think I asked the question, still a little bit confused, that some monies had already been transferred to the parking fund. And as Chief Howard noted tonight, that some money was already spent with respect to one of the ambulances and down payments on others. And the contract with billing services, which is part of EMS. So that $2.75 million figure, is that an accurate figure, or is it double counting some monies that already were dispersed? So that was the one question I think I had. And maybe I'll leave it there for now.
I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Oops. I may have shut off your camera.
Oh, shut up. Okay. Yeah.
Which
Nobody needs to see
was
us.
not my intent. There we go. We good, BCTV?
I'm pointing at you.
Yes, sir. So the question was, we have done some other spending. I think the short answer is the 2.7 million figure is correct. With what we have spent, with this action tonight, the board is recognizing that 2.7 in revenue to the general fund and assigning it to be used for payroll. Period. End of story. That's what's going on. We have spent other things, and the funds that were spent there were not ARPA, is the straightforward answer. To the parking fund, that did occur in 2022. The rules were different then, and so that's why the 2.7 million isn't the full amount of ARPA, because some of it was utilized to reimburse for lost revenue as a result of the pandemic. Anything else we've spent in terms of EMS startup funds have not by virtue of the action you're taking tonight, will not have come from ARPA. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. So, but Bob's point is like Chief Howard presented on EMS expenditures up to this point. It was like $300 and something thousand. So those monies aren't from ARPA, even though I thought that that's where those monies were coming from. I guess, or maybe I'm just.
I think those are EMS startup expenses, and our initial thought at one point was that EMS startup expenses would be covered by ARPA. With the action that we're taking this evening, those expenses and all of the other projects that the board has approved will not be funded with ARPA. Instead, they'll be funded with the tax revenues that were raised for the payroll that the ARPA funds were used for.
Oh, okay. Daniel.
Yes, and I understand all of that, and I wonder if it can be even more concrete, right? So we placed a deposit on a couple of ambulances.
Mm-hmm.
In so doing, we probably wrote a check or made an electronic funds transfer. Did that money come out of the general fund? Like, I'm looking at our finance director, for people that can't see where I'm looking. Help me understand what part that money came from, or maybe help me understand how finance works more generally. Because I think I'm a bad job.
The money for the ambulances did come out of the general fund, and it's earmarked as special EMS startup costs.
Yeah. In fact, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think I was doing the warrants when that happened, and I remember writing a question like, "Hey, what's this?"
Yeah. So everything basically comes out of the general fund.
Yeah.
And then it gets expensed to where it should go.
Yeah.
So right now, it's sitting in an account called EMS startup costs. When we take this action and we move the ARPA money into the general fund, and then we take that chunk of money that's going to come out, that's taxes, to pay for the special projects fund, that will fund the EMS startup costs.
Okay. So, okay. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it is. I do not blame people for having questions about it because it is a little convoluted, but I think I understand it now at least. Other questions or comments, board? I don't see any other hands in the room or in Zoom. Actually, can you just, I can't tell if there's a hand up.
Do we need a motion?
There's already been a motion.
You made it.
Yeah, Liz, you made the motion.
Oh, that motion.
Oh, that.
Whew. And I have the language. All right, so I don't see any other hands in Zoom or in the room. Bob, did you want to say anything on this?
No, the League of Cities and Towns has recommended this so that you can use it now, account to the federal government, and not run any risk of having to pay money back at a later point for not having spent it now. So that's the main gist of what the League of Cities and Towns is recommending. So we're following their advice.
Great. Thank you very much, Bob. All right, so there's a motion pending to approve the transfer of ARPA funds totaling at $2,757,275.47 into the general fund to pay for staff salaries in FY24. Any further discussion, board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate with an aye. Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. I think there's just one more motion to be made. Looking at you, Liz.
I move to adjourn.
Liz made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's going to carry 5-0. Thank you so much. Thank you, BCTV. Thank you to our interpreters. Thanks, Keenan, for hanging around. Thanks, Bob. And Patrick, thank you for running the Zoom. And John, thanks.
And also explaining the procedure of finance, not just hanging around.
Sorry, yes.
I don't know.